Wonderful to see you. We're taking things hopefully to a new level tonight. We've got a recorded keynote from the wonderful David Woods, who joined us earlier for the MKAI live session. Hello, Ab. We're going to roll that in just a moment. I think you're absolutely going to love that. And it sets the narrative for tonight because all the speakers have tuned into that already. Then we have three amazing speakers. I see Valerie's here. Let's have a little wave from Valerie. Yes, she is, a smile. Rose is here as well. Wonderful to see you. And Timmy was here earlier on, and if he's not here, I'm sure we'll hear from him in just a moment. Session recorded, all be up on the mkai.org website within about 24 hours or earlier from now. So keep your cameras on if you want. We're all here to learn and rise together in these sessions, which of course are inclusive. And we've got a bit of a marathon tonight because we're going to run from 5 till 7. Hello, Adelia. And then from 7 p.m. onwards, we're going into this rapid response, we're calling it, to the UK potentially dropping GDPR and what the implications of that are going to be. And we've got 4 special guests, experts in the field, who are going to join us before or at later 7 p.m. Hear from them, ask questions, explore. There's loads in this GDPR stuff, like, you know, there's not just data privacy, there's all sorts of questions about data collection, autonomous data collection in the future as we move into a more spatial world and devices, IoT, sensors, cars. This is going to get very, very interesting. So that will be straight after this session at 7 p.m. So if you want to attend that, just got to sit here and just carry on the session. So it's pretty easy. That link will be up pretty soon. I'll shout out to anybody who's posting that on LinkedIn on my behalf, so I can put the LinkedIn URL up to mention and say hello on. And we're supported by Amy, AIIMI.com, amazing local company working in the data analytics and AI space. Hello, Shira, nice to see you. And go and check them out. They make these kind of things possible. They give us very kind support and contribute resources to us as well, which is wonderful. Amy.com, check them out. And Data Reply UK as well, based in Victoria. Both these companies, they hire, they recruit, they're growing, they're taking on new clients, and they're super concerned around ethical, responsible business practices and AI. So they're definitely the kind of partners that we like to have. So that's Data Reply UK. You can find them just on a Google search or on LinkedIn as well. They're growing their following, as are Amy. And thank you to you both who make these things possible, as well as everybody here who makes these things possible, of course. Much better than talking to myself, I'm sure. So we're going to make the most of tonight. For those who came in early, they saw my OCD minute-by-minute plan for tonight that somehow we're going to try and stick to. We've got 4 talks, 1 pre-recorded. We've got 6 opinion pieces that we're going to play as live as well. Tamne, give us a wave. One of them has come from you. And then there's a variety of others as well that we're going to play. So strap in. Let's see if we pull this off and take us through to 7. Stay with me. Lots of fun chat, please, on the chat. And as always, kindness, inclusivity, gentle generosity. That's what we're all about. We learn together, we rise together, and we have fun together. That's what we're all about. So let's see if the tech works. Let me try pressing a few buttons here and see if we can roll now this amazing content from David Wood. I know you're going to love this. So let me try this now. That's my LinkedIn going mad. Let's move over to here. And here we go.
AI in 2030 is very likely to be much more powerful than the AI of today, 2021. What's the consequence of having more power? Well, I'll refer you to the remarks of the 19th century historian and politician, Lord Acton, when he said that power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And his explanation was that great men are almost always bad men. And I might add, though Lord Acton didn't say this, great corporations are almost always potentially bad corporations if they have too much power. Let's talk about foreseeing the details. If we wind back 10 years, If we consider the task in 2011 to foresee what AI might be like in 2020, that's compared to what we're trying to do tonight. Now, in 2011, most people, including myself, forecast there would be much wider use of smart glasses taking advantage of AI. Turns out that didn't happen. The implementation of that particular technology lagged expectations. It was much harder than people had imagined. On the other hand, there are other forecasts that were far too unambitious. In 2011, very few people were talking much about the power of neural networks. The growth of deep learning was not widely predicted, and people who did talk about it saw it as having limited niche interests. One more forecast I'll briefly mention was that in 2011, in fact, as late as 2014, people were saying that the possibilities of AI outplaying the best humans at the game of Go was still something considerably far into the future. It would take 10 or even 20 years. Very few people foresaw at that time that such fast progress would take place. Indeed, not 20 years, but 2 years from 2014 was all that was required. But although the details were not easy to perceive, the general trend, I believe, has been clear all along. AI is becoming more and more powerful. And I will give you 4 reasons why I think AI in 2030 will be considerably more powerful than today's AI. The first is that there's a strong demand for breakthroughs. There's a strong demand from corporations to have a competitive advantage over their rivals. There's a strong demand inside various geopolitical blocs to take control of breakthroughs in AI before other countries do so. So there's a strong perception that the entities that succeed with more powerful AI will have a great advantage. As a result, more and more people are actively seeking these breakthroughs. There are unprecedented numbers of engineers and entrepreneurs and computer scientists and designers and educators all active in this quest. And it's not just there's a lot of people involved, there's a lot of AI involved too, bearing in mind that one generation of AI can assist with the improvement of AI and with the development of a subsequent generation of AI. There are plenty of examples we could look at, such as the AutoML initiative of the Google Brain team. But it's not just that there are people who are trying to discover breakthroughs. There are plenty of ideas about what these breakthroughs might consist of. And I'm going to briefly mention a number of ideas, each of which have perhaps the potential to be as disruptive and as significant as the breakthrough of deep learning proved to be in 2012, taking many people by surprise and turning out to deliver a whole lot more than was previously expected. Now, I don't have time to go through all of these. I'll just briefly put them on the slide. Here's 7 ideas. Here's another 7 ideas. And we should also bear in mind combinations of the different ideas. I think it would be a very rash person who will say that none of these fields, none of these ideas will turn out to be truly important over the next 9 years. So to recap, I'm talking about a timeline of improvements in AI. Before the breakthroughs of deep learning in 2012, AI was dominated by what we now look back and call good old-fashioned AI, expert systems in which rules were programmed by humans based on logic and based on probability trees and so forth. Nowadays, instead of the systems all being hand-coded by humans, they are generated via machine learning based on big data. The result is often described as artificial intuition rather than artificial intelligence. There's a whole bunch of statistics involved, and the result is breakthroughs in numerous applications, and yes, biases and prejudices and other issues in terms of the opacity and the black box nature of these systems. But what I want to say is that we shouldn't just focus on the challenges and problems and yes, opportunities of today's AI. We need to look at the ways in which the AI of 2030 might be more than more of the same. There might be fundamentally different from a qualitative point of view as well as just a quantitative point of view. And the two big mistakes people make, in my view, about regarding the future of AI is first, they just think in terms of simple extensions of what we have today. And then the other mistake is that if they do consider radical changes, they want to go all the way to what we might call AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, in which AI is more capable than human reasoning in every field of reasoning, in which there might be fast recursive improvements, also known as the technological singularity. Now, personally, I think that's an extremely important discussion. I take the technological singularity as a very real possibility, and people have different views on this. But I don't want the discussion to be sidelined by that today. Instead, I want to point out that there's a whole bunch of radical improvements before we get to AGI. And that's the kinds of things I've been talking about. That AI in 2030 is probably still going to be narrow AI, but it's going to be much more powerful and therefore have significantly bigger risks and significantly bigger opportunities. And if all we do is we focus on the risks and opportunities of today's AI, then we will miss out the even bigger issues ahead. We will be fighting yesterday's wars. There are lots of complications along the way. I'll just briefly set out some of the complications. Some of them are fairly obvious, but it's worth reminding ourselves. The more powerful technology becomes, the larger its consequences, potentially both good and bad. Yet it's very hard to know which consequences do count truly as being good and which have lots of detrimental drawbacks. They can be evaluated from many points of view. Boosting profits may be good from some points of view, but if we fail to take account of all the externalities, then we are falling far short of having a true understanding. And then there's the complication that the breakthroughs I've been talking about, they're unpredictable, both in terms of their timing, in terms of when trends change from being slow and disappointing into being fast and furious. And they're also unpredictable as regards their exact scope and their impact. How much will be made possible by new breakthroughs? Are they going to be small breakthroughs which are then frustrated by another set of hard engineering problems? Or will a simple breakthrough turn out, like deep learning did, to have multiple applications? Another complication is that many of the breakthroughs depend upon not just one thing happening, but interactions between several different trends, both technological and non-technological, including legal, including changes in user expectations and attitudes, and so forth. Now, historically, many companies, many entrepreneurs have said, well, we probably get some things wrong, but that's okay because we're going to be able to learn from our failures. We're going to fail fast and fail forward and fail smart. And all of that is good, but as our technology becomes more powerful, it may not be possible to recover from some of our failures. If there is a failure, the consequences might be so dramatic that it is really something truly to be regretted, in which case we'd better see in advance what these failures are rather than just rushing ahead, moving fast and breaking things, as in the motto of Facebook for many years. We also need to bear in mind that just because an AI has had a whole string of past successes predicting things correctly, That's no reason to assume that it's always going to give the right advice in slightly different circumstances in the future, or when the environment changes, or when there are other AIs also in that same space complicating the environment. That's a strong reason why we need to have transparent AIs rather than black box AIs. In making decisions about which AIs to accelerate and which to slow down, it's insufficient to rely on individuals' good intentions or on the proclaimed AI policies, which may sound very impressive, of individual organizations. After all, as is said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We need more than just these intentions. After all, many of the individuals who seem to be admirable may turn their own blind eyes onto problem areas because they are so bound up with wishing well the projects that they are involved with. We need to have a much more critical surveillance of all these possibilities. And we need to beware a helter-skelter of competition. Competition has been the lifeblood of entrepreneurs and the lifeblood of free markets for many decades and centuries, but it has the drawback of potentially encouraging a race to the bottom, a race that will eliminate concerns for safety and for privacy and for security. And as the technology becomes more powerful, that is an even worse outcome. And finally, as we're evaluating which AIs we should accelerate and which we should slow down, we need to consider not just the technologies itself, but also possible changes in human attitudes, human institutions, and human intentions. I've written a lot about practical measures to implement some of these ideas. I have no time to go through that now, but I'll just give you a summary of the summary, which is that we collectively need to be sure we know what we're hoping to accomplish from the various AI projects that we are involved with. Which are the products and methods that are most likely to serve these goals well? And most important, how we will manage any surprises arising. And we can't just wait and wing it and say, well, that was a surprise, let's try and fix it now. We must be better at anticipating these surprises in advance. Well, as I said, I cut many corners in what I've said. Some of the gaps are covered in various books that I've written, including my forthcoming new book, Vital Foresight, which looks in more details at these singularity principles and on the other factors about the future of AI. And you can find more about that on my blog, dw2blog.com. And with that, I want to hand back to Richard, and I look forward to a great event. Thank you.
And there we go. That's how you get started, right? David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here. I'm just catching up with some of the fascinating comments in the chat already. So thanks so much for hosting that.
Thank you very, very much, David. I'm sure there will be some things to talk about there in the chat, but thank you so much for preparing that for us. It really does set the scene just wonderfully for tonight. We're very, very appreciative. Thank you, David. Please join me in thanking David on the chat there or with your emojis. That's just fantastic. Okay, so let's, David, do you want to mention your book one more time? Any links, anywhere to find it?
Well, I mentioned it actually was published yesterday, so and you can find it from my blog, or just Google Vital Foresight, because the most important thing we can all do is to become better at seeing the scenarios for the future, which is figuring out what's credible. It may not be certain, but if they're sufficiently plausible, then we need to study them more carefully and figure out what's desirable and what's not desirable, and how we can collectively steer them.
Very well said, and huge congratulations for yesterday. That's another remarkable book for your collection, and one I look forward to reading. Okay, Well, we are just about on time, so that allows me now to introduce Valerie. Now, wait till you hear this bio. I'm going to try and embarrass Valerie here now because this is just amazing what she does. So Valerie is a polymath by trade, CEO of Intelligent Story, and Associate Professor of AI Strategy and Ethical AI Design at AI Vancity. Is that pronounced correctly?
That's correct.
I got it right. A global AI expert, interactive design leader, cross-functional experience in business, government, and academia. She holds a PhD from Sorbonne University, 2 certifications from MIT in AI strategy and machine learning, and is certified by IDF in VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality design. She's worked as a tenured associate professor of Chimera and interactive arts at the University of Montpellier, a government-appointed policy advisor. She's devised inclusive forward learning reforms and transferred high-value technology into the public sector. She's based in San Francisco, where else, since 2015. She tells me she's considering a move to Milton Keynes, but still got a few things to be filed. Okay, she didn't say that. But she's led world-class teams in technology firms, healthcare, marketing agencies, servicing a portfolio of 20 plus Fortune 100 clients. She's an ethical advisor to organizations such as IEEE, Springer Nature in the UK, Women in AI in the USA, and ambassador to the World AI Summit. Goodness me, Valerie.
Remind me to just share 3 lines next time.
No, share it all. It's incredible.
Much.
Valerie, I'm making you the co-host now. I couldn't do anything just now because the whole video was blocking out my screen, but you are a co-host now. I'm going to spotlight you here. The
Wonderful.
time is yours, and thank you so much for being here. Okay.
Wonderful. Can you all hear me well?
We can, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this invitation. This group is a lot of fun, and I'm also learning a lot as I listen to all of you. So thank you so much. I'm super glad to be here today. So today I'm going to talk about what AI could look like in 2030, but I want to start with where we are at now, because I do believe that what will happen in 2030 will not happen out of the blue, out of nothing. It will be exactly what we do today. It will be a reflection of what we decide to do today with AI. And today, the companies with the largest market capitalization are all AI giants. But the power of AI, of course, will not remain the privilege of market leaders for long. AI tomorrow will serve every organization, every startup will innovate with AI. And just as electricity generated countless innovations, millions of intelligence applications tomorrow will create new opportunities. And this wave of innovation, of course, is going to bring novel ways to increase food security, promote gender equality, empower learners everywhere, foster climate change resiliency and biodiversity, and will also democratize precision medicine everywhere. So what we can see today is that from current applications of AI, we know that tomorrow AI will be an even more powerful partner to achieving goals such as the goals of United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. And our collaboration with intelligent machines really carry that potential, because by working with intelligent machine in a collaborative way, we can realize wisdom at scale. But to do that, we have to develop purposeful AI. And there is a famous quote that I thought about when I prepared this talk today. And that's a quote I'm sure you all know. And that quote is about the future, but it is also about today, about the present. That quote is from the science fiction novelist William Gibson. And it says, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And of course, he's absolutely right in implying that future innovations are somehow intertwined with our present and likely with our past. And yet, innovation means the introduction of something radically new, like AI, for instance. But is AI an innovation? Is AI a revolution? Or is AI the culmination of an evolutionary process that actually began a long time ago? And in fact, as we all know, AI is already a 70-year-old technology, right? It's a technology that started to emerge as a computer science discipline in the mid-century. And the idea of autonomous and intelligent machines is also an ancient idea, and it goes far beyond 70 years ago. It's a concept that is actually millennia old. And in my research, I found that a lot of ancient mythologies are actually full of autonomous robots and intelligent devices that are the ancestors of current innovations. And after all, the first robot, for instance, was imagined by mythology. It was imagined thousands of years ago in the form of Talos, who was an autonomous bronze robot crafted by the god Hephaestus. In the 12th century, I think of the polymath Al-Jazari, who designed hundreds of automated devices that are in many ways the ancestors of today's home robots. And after him, Leonardo da Vinci built the first self-driving vehicle. And it's funny because earlier before this meeting, we chatted a little bit together about self-driving vehicles. And we're saying that it's very unlikely that the world will see self-driving vehicles everywhere in 2030, because it's very hard to develop and it's very complex for a machine to deal with the chaos of the world. And as you can see, this project is actually a very ancient project, since Leonardo da Vinci, like I was saying, was the first person who actually built the first self-driving vehicle. And the purpose of that little automated cart that the genius designed was to deliver vegetables to people throughout the city of Florence. Interestingly, 500 years later, Leonardo's invention was an inspiration for NASA, because the first robot sent to Mars was designed based on the blueprint of Leonardo's self-driving cart. So the history of autonomous and intelligence machines is old and interdisciplinary. And that's a point I would like to insist on, because it's very important to understand that AI is not the work of one person, and it's not the work of even 10 people, or it's not the work of a specific discipline. It is really a technology and a concept that comes from a lot of contributions over the world and throughout the course of time. And while it emerged as a computer science discipline in the 20th century, it actually spanned over millennia as an idea, as a concept. And that concept involved diverse minds from diverse disciplines, belonging to different cultures, located in various geographies. And we're thinking of the work of philosophers, theologists, storytellers, mathematicians, artists, computer scientists, and maybe every human on Earth at some point dreamt of intelligent and autonomous machines. And even what we call actually ambient intelligence, which is the network of 150 billion connected objects that will surround us in 2025. Ambient intelligence may well be the realization of animism, the most shared trait by ancient human cultures. So again, AI is not a revolution. It is the realization of an ancient idea explored by a diversity of stakeholders. And in the last 10 years, that idea, which was already a technology, really blossomed. We saw a lot of breakthroughs, and we saw an increasing rate of adoption and interest in AI. And that happened because the digital ecosystem reached a point of maturity that created the perfect storm for the evolution and the adoption of AI technology. The intensification of transaction between the virtual and physical spheres generated, as we know, an ocean of data. And let's just take, for instance, internet traffic from mobile phones. It has increased 60-fold in just a decade, which is amazing if you think about it. It's an increasing, it's an incredible increase, 60-fold in just a decade. And I would take it would take, for instance, one person 181 million years to try to download all the data that exists on the internet today. And if you think of the data that exists throughout the world, well, 90% of the world's data was actually created in the last 2 years. So this data flood has fueled the performance of algorithms. It has improved them, although they are not fully reliable today, because that data, the data that is used to train algorithms, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, is not diverse and inclusive enough. It doesn't represent everybody in the world yet. However, that data flood really drove innovation with intelligent technologies. And there are other factors. There's more computing power today than ever, more in a single smartphone today than in all of NASA computers used to send man on the moon, which is incredible. Algorithms grew more sophisticated, especially with deep learning and reinforcement learning, which really boosted improvements in computer vision and natural language processing. And that trend is not going to stop, because as we move forward, and we will move forward toward 2030, we will see an exponential acceleration of the performance of those fields. Computer vision is only going to become better and better, and so is natural language processing. In the last 10 years, AI has also attracted large investments like never before. Just in 2019 alone, $26 billion were injected in AI startups. And we thought that during the pandemic that those investments were going to be fragilized, but that was not the case. AI startups just got more and more funding. So large investments really allow to dedicate efforts into the research and development of AI. And that is not going to decrease. This is only going to go up as we move forward in the future. But very importantly, and I don't think we talk enough about that, there was also a huge cultural shift that occurred in the last 10 years, and that will keep influencing what will happen in the next 10 years. And that cultural shift is that of the digital users' expectations. Today, we are all looking for applications that give us a lot of autonomy of use. We're obsessed with personalizing the services we're using. We want to gain insights on pretty much everything we do and get always more information and more intel and more connections with others through digital media. So we're looking for experiences that are really tightly intertwining the physical and the virtual spheres. So as you can see, all those factors really created, like I said earlier, the perfect storm to empower leading technology companies. And it enabled them to put AI at the core of their operations. And that's why today, the top 6 companies globally are Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, Facebook, and Tencent. And all those companies are behind the largest investments and the largest breakthrough in AI. They are all multi-service platforms that derive tremendous value from AI and automation. And they leverage insights from centralized data. They enable agile experimentation. They deploy hundreds of AI-based applications, and they interconnect users and partners from various markets. That model is not going to go away anytime soon. Those platforms are only going to grow in larger networks of platforms. These platforms could do that, those brands could do that, because they are harnessing what I call the 4 strengths of AI: prediction, automation, autonomy, and human augmentation, in the sense of collaboration between machines and humans that can expand the human potential. That's what I call human augmentation here. So as a result, these platforms will grow exponentially in scale, scope, expertise, and learning. But it is very important to understand that creating value with AI in such a way is not the privilege of AI giants, because tomorrow every business will be powered by AI, and AI will augment human potential everywhere. Every person will live learn, imagine, and create with AI. And as it makes its way into every home, every creation, and every mind, AI will not only influence every culture, it will also generate new cultures. Just as electricity ignited unprecedented innovations, AI will cast a new kind of light on the destiny of every of us. And as it gets cheaper, more accessible, pervasive, and powerful, of course, AI will also bring ethical and existential questions, and it already does. Questions that only a diverse, inclusive, and multidisciplinary community can tackle. And because the AI transformation is not just a technology transformation, it brings, of course, a lot of questions for us, because it is a human transformation. It's about the need to become a different kind of global village, driven by the use of AI to solve the most pressing problems on Earth and off Earth. It's about becoming a different kind of society where ethics precedes and presides over innovation technology. And you know, I think that artificial intelligence, and here I'm going to talk about AGI that David Wood mentioned earlier, artificial general intelligence or advanced intelligence, a level of artificial intelligence that could meet the level of human intelligence, for instance. If one day this level of AI is ever created, I think it will deserve its name only if it embeds values professed by intelligence and pursues universally beneficial goals. And that's a difficult task. But as JFK said, we do these things because not because they're easy, but because they are hard. And there's no doubt in my mind that the development of unethical AI would lead to infinitely greater difficulties. So AI holds extraordinary opportunities, but it is entangled with the legacies of prejudice and inequality. And that's why I just mentioned the fact that if we develop unethical AI, an AI that is not ethically aligned with human values, we would run into greater and greater and greater difficulties. And we certainly don't want to do that. Data sets and algorithms can embed human bias and imperialistic views that nurtured inequality long before computers were even invented. So we must ask the right questions today, so tomorrow can be a safer and fairer world with AI, not despite AI. The future of AI and really depends actually on how we think about intelligence today, not in 2030, not in 2045, not further down the road. When I talk about the design of intelligence, which is a topic that I really like to talk about, what does it mean to be intelligence? What is intelligence? Intelligence has been poorly defined, and now we're talking about artificial intelligence, which is another kind of intelligence. When I talk about the design of intelligence, and particularly of artificial intelligence, I'm really talking about shifting our perspective on how we define intelligence and how we reconcile empathy, emotional life, shared values, and fundamental rights with the design of intelligent machines. AI technology will be deemed intelligent the day it can enter a shared world of meanings and generate meaningful value for all life on Earth. And the discipline of ethics aims precisely at fostering such value. And the growing field of AI ethics addresses the current and foreseeable risks associated with AI, so it can actually foster the benefits of AI throughout the future and in the present. One form of ethical risk associated with AI is that, on my opinion, is that of missing the opportunity to leverage AI to really drive tangible equity in the world. It is very important to address everything that is happening today in terms of risk associated with AI, such as algorithmic risk, misuse, weaponization of AI, authoritarian use of AI, and it is equally important to address also what I am suggesting here, address the risk of missing the opportunity to leverage AI to drive tangible equity in the world, equity among human beings, but also equity for all other sentient beings we share this planet with. So I know it's hard to make predictions about what AI will look like or will be like, or what our future with AI will be or feel like in 2030. It's hard, and as David Wood said earlier in his talk, breakthroughs are unpredictable, and most of the time prophecies get their timeline wrong. But I'm going to try a few things here. As we move toward 2030, AI will exponentially be more powerful, more accessible, omnipotent, and omnipresent. Computer vision and natural language processing will keep improving exponentially as machine learning methods will get more sophisticated. And here, I'm not taking any risk. Those things are highly predictable. I'm in the safe zone of prophecy here. Not too hard to predict, because we already see what those fields are capable of today. Just to give you an example, computer vision in terms of classification is already superior to the classification ability of the human eye, right? Because the error rate of computer vision in classification is 3%, the human eye is 5%. So we know that those fields are already incredibly performing and well, and they will only get better. Machine intelligence will invisibly pervade our reality through more intuitive interactions and interfaces, such as voice. And why not? Vision. Who knows? Every organization will be an AI organization, and hopefully governed by regulations and AI ethics foundations. AI ethics is now absolutely unavoidable. It is a pillar for the strategic adoption and deployment of AI. There's not a single company today that can succeed with AI if that company doesn't have a strong AI ethics foundation. It is really, really core to succeeding with AI, and this will only grow as we have a bigger and bigger community addressing AI ethical issues and driving towards how to solve for them, and importantly, how to prevent them. In 2030, AI will automate everything, because everything that can be automated will be automated. Every decision that can be made by an intelligent machine will be made by an intelligent machine autonomously. And although, you know, such changes will not happen overnight, they will impact very profoundly companies, organizations, and workers. In the 50s, if you know, I'm thinking about a prophecy that went wrong, actually, time-wise, a prophecy that Marvin Minsky made. He said that it would take less than 20 years for AI to be able to do any work that humans can do. And clearly his timeline was off. But according to the World Economic Forum, by 2025, so halfway through 2030, AI will displace 85 million jobs and create 97 million new jobs across 26 countries. And we also know that by 2030, 50% of employees worldwide will need reskilling. That's a pretty big number. 50% of employees worldwide will need reskilling. And this is where we need to pay attention to the risk of inequity, because AI generated jobs and wealth, as well as the opportunity for reskilling, will not be shared equally. The gender disparities that exist today in technology are really alarming, and they will be aggravated by automation. Access to digital literacy will be critical to empowering women in the AI economy, and we need to direct our efforts towards that. And I'm calling on entrepreneurs who can hear this talk to develop multilingual and culturally inclusive AI application to upskill women in digital and in AI, because we also have such a gender gap in AI. AI reskilling initiatives can really contribute to supporting regional AI voices, and that's also what we need to ensure that the development of AI is diverse and inclusive. Here's the other thing I want to talk about. Today's social media and service platforms, as we know them, which are those incredibly powerful platforms I've mentioned in the beginning of this talk, they will become much bigger than what we know today. They will become a multiverse of interconnected platforms, all powered by AI, right? So just picture that for a second. Platforms as we know them today, social media as we know them today, they will become a multiverse of interconnected platforms powered by AI. The digital and physical spheres will become increasingly interdependent. And we will see AI-generated synthetic experiences that will create alternate realities that we will navigate for work, entertainment, insights, education, creative experimentation, and socialization. We will inhabit, literally, increasingly compelling virtual identities and communities. And from a creative perspective, what I foresee for 2030 is really the rise of highly personalizable and symbiotic virtual environment that will self-generate and evolve from learning directly from users' interactions. And all this will be possible because the force strength of AI that I've evoked earlier will fuel that type of innovation. And of course, if you think of those innovations in the future, you also think of the risk that those could of course, convey, the risk that we've observed today with the smaller platforms we are interacting with. So AI designers in the future, but today already, will need to ensure that relevancy is not replaced with immediacy, diversity with uniformity, choice with soft coercion, imagination with mindless response, and individual fulfillment with fruitless system interactions. That's very important. We don't want to reproduce the risks that we see today, the vulnerabilities that we see today in the future, because if we do, you can be sure they will be amplified in the future by more powerful technologies that will have the power to amplify everything. So let's keep that in mind. But the good news is that those platforms in the future will also draw a lot of potential for benevolence and beneficence. And I'm thinking of the opportunity to create empathy-driven learning environment, purposefully designed to amplify human potential. And that potential will also, of course, affect the way industries strategize, work, and manage their assets. Because in 2030, intelligent software will be layered onto the physical world via embarked and ambient intelligence. And ultimately, AI will really become our primary interface with the physical world. It will layer real-time insights onto every aspect of life. And I mentioned earlier that by 2025, there will be 150 billion sensors and devices connected to the Internet of Things in the world surrounding us. That is an enormous number, and it's probably actually below what will really be. The next stage of this is AIoT, the articulation between AI, automation, and the Internet of Things. And this form of ambient intelligence, it's called ambient intelligence, will become a standard in industrial management. And that means that in 2030, I can easily predict that intelligent digital twins will also develop exponentially. They are the cyber-physical model of an entity or a system. They already exist in some industries, but they are not as developed and as embedding of AI that there will be in 2030. They will be able to continuously reflect the physical and virtual state of a site and draw insights from locally captured data. They will give human teams the opportunity to collaborate more thoroughly with robots and with AI distributed intelligence in physical sites by monitoring them remotely and recalibrating systems remotely too. So that's a very, very important shift that is going to occur by 2030. And finally, the last two things I'd like to talk about as I'm coming closer to the conclusion of my talk is the fact that, of course, a very, very big contribution of AI between now and 2030 will be in the creation of a truly inclusive precision medicine that will be democratized. Not only this realm is going to be more and more regulated, but is going to also be more and more democratized. AI-powered real-time diagnostics and assistive software will enhance cheap and sophisticated medical devices, and it will democratize specialized medicine worldwide. We're already seeing that trend, and this will be accelerated by the evolution, especially of natural language processing, computer vision, deep learning, and any breakthrough, frankly, that can happen between the moments we're experiencing today and 2030. And this will also influence the way we actually approach assisted living and wellness in aging society. We're already seeing examples of that in countries like Japan, for instance. Intelligent robotics and AI assistants are going to proliferate in those sectors. We will see the deployment of specialized social robots that will primarily occur in the Far East, where artificial creatures interestingly benefit from a positive social status due to cultural legacies. I wish I had time to talk about this, but I don't. But that's a very, very interesting topic. And so their adoption will really help aging society, but it will also negatively impact the wages of human workers by reducing overtime pay and by amplifying risks that we are already seeing today of a more volatile employment. So those questions are questions that need to be addressed, and they all lead to one direction. We need to prepare people, we need to reskill them, we need to create equal opportunity for that massive transformation that AI is going to bring into the workplace. And of course, we also need to prepare our mind for very, very inspiring and positive opportunities, because adopting virtual and embodied intelligent assistants in 2030 will also foster the opportunities for purposeful AI to flourish in realms like well-being, self-care, personal development. So there's a lot of things, positive things to think about also to balance those risks that are systematically associated with the influence of technological change. And to conclude,
Valerie, 30-second conclusion, Valerie. We're 9 minutes over.
30 seconds, absolutely. That's my conclusion. I'd like to circle back to the future is already here. It's not just evenly distributed yet by Gibson. He clearly warned us that the future could be marked by inequalities comparable to those that exist today. So tomorrow and each day that we get closer to the future, our mission is really to ensure that the unfairness of the present is not amplified by AI or any other technological innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I think that was a breathless session, I would say, and action-packed completely. And you know, we can conclude from this that right from history, we have been dreaming about intelligent machines and the way it has evolved. We are just implementing it because of our processing powers, sophisticated algorithms, etc. But what is important is making it purposeful and universally beneficial, to have it more ethical, responsible, explainable parts into AI. We are going to see AI everywhere, but the way we put the intelligence into it with an ethical background, diversity, and equity and fairness is going to be the key to lead us to success. The marriage between ethics and innovation is the key to this. I think this is what we should look forward to. I leave you to the chat to answer the questions of people. And Vibhav, welcome, and can you give an update about the community? Thank you.
Hi everyone. Just to give you a quick idea what MKAI is about, it fits in very well with what's being discussed right now. If you are an AI enthusiast, if you're thinking on artificial intelligence, whether you have a technical background or non-technical background, come join MKAI. It's your platform, your views matter. Quickly, we have a Telegram open discussion group, the link of which I will just drop here for you to join that chat and take forward your AI conversation. We have projects, you can check our website. We have focused discussions on AI healthcare, AI philosophy, AI in green economy, biodiversity, GIS and sustainability. That's to make the earth a better place. So there, in short, there are chats, there are blogs, and I just put in the link here. Please look into it. And also one last thing, we've seen people sort of putting in their individual LinkedIn links. We've created a master post, which I just dropped that link again in the chat, which if you can comment and support that link, you will be able to connect to everyone that is here on this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vibhav, for that. I'll put myself on there. I think click some buttons here. Valerie, thank you from me as well. That was amazing. We love it when people have slides, but when they just talk from the heart like that, wow.
You know what?
Spellbound.
I hate slides. I mean, I hate doing them. I love looking at people's slides, but I hate doing them. So most of the time I have to do them. Today I thought, no, I'm just going to talk to these amazing people.
We're very, very grateful. Thank you. Okay, let's see if the tech works for us again. And I've got the opinion piece now, so see who you recognize from this. This is a very, very short collection of opinion pieces. We need my WhatsApp, but I'll play these for you now.
We are undoubtedly going to see an avalanche of technological innovation and societal change alongside with that. I think one of my biggest concerns is the AI arms race, especially between the US and China, the weaponization of artificial intelligence. I think and then job displacements, which will cause huge societal upheaval if we don't do it right. It's the first time in our history where we will not be able to upscale people fast enough at scale. So imagine that if most people on Earth don't have an income, don't have warmth or clothing, or it's going to go back to the Stone Age. When it comes to medicine and education, there are so many promises, and I'm definitely an optimist. But I do think we should keep our eyes open and work together and debate and talk government legislation, but we can't just wait for governments, Richard. We have to influence education policy, have to influence military policy. And so I think we're going to be in for some interesting times, but we only have a short time to rein this technology in, and we don't have time to sleep and wait around for it.
The Institute for Accountability in the Digital Age was founded in 2017 at the instigation of Enrique Pamir of UNESCO. We saw a growing gap between the fast developing world of digital technology and the legal and regulatory framework. Now, initially, we were looking at awareness and the technology itself, specifically GDPR, cybersecurity, AI. With AI, we're looking at explainability. But we come to realize that a 21st century issue needs 21st century solutions. So if you go down that path, you actually open up a lot of new doors. So if you're looking at for the coming decade, where you're going to see AI going to be used, that's actually where you can use AI to hold other systems accountable. Now you see that already slowly developing with governments looking at data-driven government, which will need AI engines to do that. Examples discussed like automated terms and conditions or child pornography. Is this scary? Yes, it's beyond scary, but it's going to happen, so we need to understand and control it.
The Law Commission in the UK has recently published 3 papers. Those were in accordance with the Automated and Electric Vehicles Act, the AEVA, on autonomous vehicles, and it is working on legislation to cover all of the ambiguities that lie with the liability of autonomous vehicles. For example, with car insurance, tax and disputes around sleeping in these cars or being drunk in the driver's seat. So the problem with this is that it will take years to develop a robust and unwavering legislation that will not adequately serve numerous generations for the developments that are yet to come. The speed of the technological advancements and developments in this sector is only going to accelerate and overtake the rate at which regulation is passed and implemented. There's definitely an ethical standpoint here also, where the legislation needs to cover the cybercrime that is being provoked with autonomous developments. It will be normal to buy antivirus software for your car in a few years' time. It's unassailable, in my opinion, that we definitely need to regulate in this area, and we need it fast for the safety of mankind.
So thank you, Johan and Fritz and Tara there for your contributions in advance to this session. So it brings me great pleasure now to bring our next speaker into the spotlight. Hello, hello. How are you, Rose?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, I'll just pop myself up here because we plan to have a conversation, a fireside, so to speak, and I hope everybody else is going to join this fireside with me. Rose, let me introduce you first. You are the director for the UN Climate Technology Center, 20 years experience providing policy advice on a wide range of climate change, environment, and sustainable development issues. You've served previously as Chief National Resources Officer at the African Development Bank and held various leadership positions within the UN Development Programme. You have a PhD in Environment and Natural Resource Governance, a master's degree in International Comparative Law, and a Bachelor of Law degree. Another wonderful CV, Rose, that puts mine to shame, obviously, but that's why we want to speak to you and learn from you. Rose, let me ask you this to begin with. There's something like 300 technology transfers that you've experienced and facilitated in over 100 developing countries. It's probably an expansive question, but if you can, what have been some of your experiences from those?
Thank you, Richard. I must start by commending both David and Valerie. I think they've laid a very wonderful platform for us to have this conversation. And I do agree with the audience. I was watching the chat that we were happy to have Valerie go on. So thank you very much. But to your question, really, I think it is what Valerie said, that AI transformation is not just about technology. It's about human transformation. And as you mentioned, for the work that I do, the context within which I see AI, therefore, is to help us achieve the universal beneficial goals or our shared values as a global community. Working for the United Nations, as I have a very long time, and having worked in the development world, so the context within which I see these shared values is what we agreed upon is in the SDGs. So it is anything from climate change, but it's also about poverty, things we talked about, gender equality, enabling access to energy for all. And I'm not trying to be a dampener of the beautiful party we are having so far. Please put any untoward comments down to the vagaries of my job, because traveling extensively around the world and living and witnessing firsthand human suffering, poverty, and deprivation on the one hand, and then on the other hand, seeing the possibilities that technology brings, and especially AI. In fact, I am extremely hopeful. I tell Richard all the time, I'm an eternal optimist, because I always see the possibilities of what we can do if only, and that's the word, if only we can harness a lot of these technologies. And I see AI as one of those that can help us do that. So to the question you raise again, so the issues of fairness, equity, and inclusion, or what the role of, for example, technologies like blockchain can be, or how we can scale up AI. Because I can tell you that when we talk about it, it sounds almost as if it's available and equally accessible around the globe. But if you look at the countries that I am mandated to serve, these countries are in Africa, they're developing countries in Africa, in the Asia and Pacific region, and in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. I was looking at the numbers in preparation for this meeting. The total population of these countries alone is 2.7 billion people. The majority of these people actually do not have access to what we're talking about. The infrastructure for energy or electricity, the cost of data in some of these countries is so prohibitively high. And then just the level of skilling and innovation. A lot of the countries that I travel in, the developing countries, they just don't have systems of innovation that would enable them to plug into this wonderful and amazing prospect that is being offered by the advancement in AI. But again, as I said, that in spite of this, I must confess that I see real opportunities in some of these countries. And where do I see the opportunities? It's in the work we do. I'll give you an example. The last conversation, Valerie, we are having on robotics and automated autonomous vehicles. So one of the requests, for example, we had from one of the countries, a developing country, I don't think I'll mention it for proprietary reasons, is that they wanted support to use autonomous vehicles and robot and drone technology for precision agriculture. But when in fact we went into the country and reviewed their laws, they were all classified under military hardware. And so they could actually not import any of these technologies. And these were, laws that were made several years ago when there was an understanding of the benefits of AI and robotics and autonomous vehicles, but they're not sure. So it was classified in a manner that was really prohibitive in terms of access and innovation, the level of licensing that was required. And so before they could even benefit from these technologies that were able to transfer from companies in countries in Europe that were willing to transfer it, we had to review the entire legal system, not just relating to military hardware, but importation laws, tax incentives. So it's a whole range of things. And what that did, it opened up the possibilities, not just for the precision agriculture they wanted, but for health and for other sectors. And therein lies my eternal optimism when I say that there's a real sense of hope in what we do in this. So maybe I will let you say something, but just to say that, I'd just like to share with you some of the experiences based on the work that I do in these countries.
I'm just spotlighting you, Valerie, again there. I saw that you were nodding. Those sentiments obviously resonate with you.
Yes, absolutely, because I was born in New Caledonia. It's a small tropical island, minuscule tropical island, a French colony nearby Australia. And when you're born on a very small island, and my ancestors are from there, so they're indigenous, you have a view of the world, a perspective of the world that is slightly different, because when everybody is talking about those great innovations out there and you're a child and you're like, oh, wow, that sounds great, but we don't have access to any of that here, right? So it's an interesting gap between what can be done and what people have access to. So yeah, I found very compelling the example you just gave, Rose, of the fact that on one hand, there is an opportunity to use technology to promote food security, but it can't be used because regulations have not evolved in that direction, and maybe they are also shaped by the cultural views of those who crafted those regulations, and that gap is a problem, and it happens very often. We see that in precision medicines too. Some tools are created to foster a better diagnosis in developing countries, but then we realize that actually we didn't factor in that the technologies that exist already in those countries cannot host that great app that was designed to actually help them. So we have to redo that, restart from. So yes. That gap, in perspective is fundamental to address, and we don't talk about it enough. Yes.
Thank you, Valerie. And you may as well stay on the couch. That's what Graham Norton does, isn't it? He keeps people on the stage. But Rose, let's before we dive any deeper into this, I remember a serendipitous moment at the airport where I was reading Richard Wilson and Kate Pickett's brilliant book, The Spirit Level: Why Equality is Better for Everyone, and saw someone else reading it at the same time. That was like 10 years ago. Do you think we still don't understand this one statement, equality is better for everyone?
Yeah, I think it really is. And again, therein is where I see the advantage of technological advancement and access that technology gives. Because as Valerie was saying, when you come from a small developing country like I do, it's very easy to sit in your little corner of the world and imagine that, the world is as it is because that's what you see. What technology has allowed us to be aspirational, because sitting in the little village in Uganda, where I come from, we are all able to aspire to what is possible, to the possibilities of what the highest endeavor of human achievement can be, because we have access to this technology. Sitting on a mobile phone, you don't even need an advanced computer or an iPad or any other gizmo that is advanced. And so that is really important for us to recognize that the applicability of AI allows us to enable access in ways that we never envisioned before and reach the most remote part of the world. And the technology, infrastructural technology that supports that also need not to be on grid levels of the scales we used to have in the past. And so I think it is about changing our thinking and outlook to life and what is possible, and understanding that AI can transform the lives of one part of the global community, but it can actually transform all 7 billion people. Imagine a world where all 7 billion people lived exactly the way everybody lives in Denmark, where I live right now. I think it would be a wonderful world. And again, that is within the context of the shared values. And for me, as I said, within the Sustainable Development Goals, where we talk about the environment, life on Earth, poverty, gender equality. Those are what we agreed as the shared values. And so I think that is where, for me, I see the possibilities. And I see it, whether I'm in a small Pacific island, whether I'm in Bolivia in Latin America, whether I'm in a small country in Africa, the human condition when it comes to poverty and pain and suffering is the same. The possibilities that technological transformation and AI offers are exactly the same, because it's the great equalizer. I think I've said this to you, Richard, before. It is the great equalizer that enables us to use the same platform, to access the same medicine, same education, the same healthcare. And again, as I say, that is really what I see. Two roles. I also speak within the context of working with governments. Working for the UN, we are international civil servants, so we generally work with governments, increasingly with the private sector. And that is where, even as we talk about the big tech and how they are driving this race, as it were, you also have to factor in the governments. This is possible because of the context within which they are thriving. They are able to innovate, they're able to scale up, they're able to bring in investments. That is not possible elsewhere. So how do you enable that as well? That depends on leadership, it depends on policy, it depends on the regulatory environment, nurturing a system of innovation. So when Valerie was talking about girls, every day now, it's become fashionable to talk about girls in science globally, but especially in the global south. We know that it does make a difference. The more equal societies in the world, there's science, algorithmic data, and real data to show us, and the more equal societies where men and women have some levels of access and then choice on the life they want to lead. So those are, for me, as I said in the beginning, it's not just about technological transformation, it's about transforming the human condition, the cultures and the way we live. And that's the context within which I look at it. So how do we ensure equity, access, inclusion, and then attainment of our common aspirations as humans for a better life?
Yes.
Brilliant. That's all I want to say. I think you're brilliant. It's wonderful to listen to you. Thank you.
Rosa, I mean, there's so many factors here, and there's the domino effect, and you talk about leadership and economies and networks and so on, as in the physical people networks. Is there any benefit to be gained from just enhancing the technology? So if you did just put more stable power in, or cheaper data, or more reliable connectivity, do those alone, do they make any significant difference, or do you have to have the ecosystems that go with them?
Ultimately, you need an ecosystem. It's an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary piece of engagement. So there's no question about it. But there are some fundamentals that must be in place. I'll use the example of Africa because that's where I come from. In Africa alone, over 600 million people do not have access to electricity. So that alone is enough to prohibit any sort of uptake for AI. If you were to enable access to electricity, it would mean you would be able to establish the rest of the infrastructure that is required to enable access. to all technologies, including AI. So there are certain fundamentals, but ultimately, I think there's no question about it. It's multidisciplinary, but you would need the right regulatory and investment environment. You would need the right level of innovation that has to be driven by the level of skilling and education that is in those countries in science. So it's a whole ecosystem, but we agree that there are certain fundamentals that must be in place.
And does it all start with this access to education, access to opportunity, and access to finance, and particularly for women? Is that one of the key focus areas for the UN?
I think access overall.
Okay.
There are certain enablers or equalizers, as we call them. Education is one of them. It's the only reason I'm here and not, say, my cousin in the little village I came from. The only difference between me and her is the level of education and skilling I've had the opportunity to achieve. So education is one of them, but technology also lies in that category as a real enabler. And we know finance is the same. Countries with higher GDPs are able to invest more innovation in an R&D and therefore drive higher levels of technological advancement. So that is an important element. Countries with low development indices and low GDPs do not have money to invest in innovation or R&D. I've told you I travel extensively now. I manage projects in over 100 countries. You go to these countries, there are no systems of innovation, national innovation, simply precisely for that level. So those are some of the variables that you look at when you're trying to understand what can be done. But then you know that innovation, education does make a difference. Access to energy does make a difference. Electrification, we now know with the renewables that can be achieved off-grid without huge infrastructural investments that went with the prior electrification system. That is useful. So we now know, and with the AI applications, we can be very precise in where we target. So in terms of geographies, but also in terms of gender and all that where you need. And that's the beauty of what AI offers. So we can be very specific and very intentional in what we want to do. And that is also the beauty of what this offers.
There's a question from David Wood. Actually, Valerie, perhaps you would lend your thoughts to it after Rose has spoken on it. He says, do you see countries where they're encouraging sharing across the whole population the benefits of AI, potentially other technologies, but primarily AI? And if you do, are these examples that we can learn from? Is that Denmark, Rose, is it? Or is there other countries as well where you see that?
Sorry, I thought you were asking Valerie.
No, I was going to asking Valerie to comment after you've spoken, to give her time to think as well. But what springs to mind when we talk about equity in AI in a country? Is there somewhere?
Yeah, I mean for the work we do when we talk about equity as opposed to equality, it's very specific. So it's about access and enabling that access. So it is a very specific, word, what we mean in terms of intention, and so our intentions are directed to that. So yes, and that is what I say. So I'll give an example. If you're in Denmark, how do you achieve equity? Universal healthcare system, universal education. That puts everybody on the same standing. And then the choices that emerge out of that. And I think that is important. And the thing about the human condition and technology, I like one of the comments someone made when both David and Valerie were speaking. He said, brilliant speakers. It demonstrates that humans still have superiority over robots. I thought it was a great compliment. I should say that. But the idea is that we learn. Knowledge is incremental. Now we learn in leaps and bounds. Before it would take us years, sometimes decades. Now with the advancements in AI, our ability to learn is very fast. So the levels of increment are extremely high. That's why we are now using terms like leapfrogging. So those are the things that really make a difference. So when you talk about equity, we're talking about access, intentionally enabling that access, I think is what is important.
Giles is going to nudge me on time in a minute, but Valerie, what country springs to mind or area springs to mind when we talk about equitable AI?
It's a tough question. If you don't mind, I'd rather react to what Rose said, because she insisted a lot on access. And you know, there are things that people don't realize, like, for instance, in the world, 250 million women have fewer access to the internet than men. That's a huge gap. And so access matters also, even when the technology is already there. It's not necessarily equitably accessible to everyone, no matter what. So yeah, equity and access, I think, are very, very important topics. I just wanted to react to that.
Yeah, Rose, there's a lot of love in the chat, by the way, if you get a chance to look at this, and some questions actually for you that unfortunately we do 2 hours and obviously it's tight. David, did you want to make a point or ask Rose something?
I'm just hoping that we can find more examples which can be useful inspirations, because everybody can say it would be nice if there was more equity. And Denmark is a great example, I agree. But many people may feel, well, Denmark's sort of already a developed country. What can countries that aren't so fortunate as Denmark do? So I'm hoping, and it might not be so successful an example, but we should be able to point to some examples. What I remember is the way that some countries, which I remember from the 1980s, were in quite a poor situation. The first time I visited South Korea in 1982, I was shocked at how backward many parts of it is. And they have managed to apply technology generally for lots of benefit for many people in society. So I'm just hoping we can find at least some other examples and highlight, because examples can have a kind of a fire starter nature. They can spark inspiration. So that's what lies behind my question.
Thank you. Rose, do you want to comment on that?
You're absolutely right, David. In fact, one of the things I should have done a better job about presenting more examples in the South, where I really work, in the global South, on what we are doing that is transformational, that lies behind my optimism, where I believe it's possible, because there are indeed many countries where we've used these technologies that have created really great transformational change. That's the language we now use in the UN. So you're right about that. So I think that is really important. As I said, 280 technologies that have been availed free, by the way, by innovative companies in the West, or developing countries as we call them, is also an indication of the global good that can come from cooperation between the private sector or industry and government. I think that is something I want to highlight, because it is something we do within the work that I do, partnering with these great companies and them availing this technology. It's really at almost zero cost if we think of the level of investment required to bring an innovation to market. So that is really, I think, another part to the good story that David, you're saying, you know, what are those examples that worked? So we really do have a lot of those. It's the point at which I would encourage you to please do look at our website. You will see some of the wonderful things, at least on our last count. 90 million people who've transformed, whether it's health, access to water, or energy. And that's why I said it's not just about the technology, it's the people changing the human condition, bringing our shared values together to the global community. Yeah.
Rose, thank you. I can't believe that's time so quickly. I feel like we're just getting warmed up. But Jaisal, do you have some summarizing points from Rose?
I think I'm really having a heartfelt thanks to Rose for sharing that insight, and how important it is to use technology, not for just the transformation, but for transforming the quality of human condition, because it is the same worldwide when it comes to pain or technology. And I think what is important is bridging the gap between the developing and the developed countries, and transitioning them and giving access to technology and using technology for the right use is what we intend to do for with shared values. Equality of society is what we should aim for, all of us, whether it is technology or other parts where our values are going to count. Thank you, Rose, and leave you to the chat for the questions. Over to you, Richard.
Oh, we'll just say thank you, Rose, and Valerie for being on the couch as well. That's superb. Jaisal, thanks for that summary. You could always go to Google and type in Boundless Podcast and then put Rose's name, and there's Rose and I having a chat all about AI and environmental sustainability. Rose, thank you so very much. Timmy, I've put you on screen. I'm going to introduce you in just a second. It's great to see you looking so well. I've got another short little clip, so we're really trying to squeeze it in tonight to maximize the time we spend together. So we're going to see 3 clips now, then Timmy will come back and we'll talk to you. Does that sound okay?
Fantastic.
Looking
Awesome.
forward to it. We still got time, Timmy. I've made sure I got plenty of time. So here we go. Let's share this.
So this level of artificial intelligence, as we are amazed about the advancements, there also come threats that we often just take it to be, a fiction, but that might at some point in time crop up. And with regard to Sophia getting a citizenship, I feel that she has all of the rights as you and me have today, right? So just imagine about the implications, imagine about the civil and criminal liabilities that we are bound, but she is not. So just imagine if there's something going haywire, or let's say there's a legal complication at some point or the other, we would not be in a position to determine the framework. There's no regulatory framework that talks about or that curbs the civil or criminal liabilities of that particular artificial intelligence, may that be a bot or anything else. So as it happens, technology is always something that is there first, and then only we are having that kind of a legislative framework, which might be problematic. And I believe that the time is there wherein we already need to have a regulatory framework apart from having a check on the ethics and just a general breakthrough of that. So this is what I believe we should be having, that kind of a legislative framework.
Energy and AI are areas where exact mathematical function cannot come in. These areas include load flow analysis, energy economics, and load forecasting. Imagine a scenario in renewable energy source like wind, solar, where the generators are not dispatchable. By use of artificial neural networks or convolutional neural networks, one can be able to predict times of peak load and base loads, thus determining the cost of that renewable source. When there is a need for expansion in say, a solar PV, the model can be able to predict by how much this is needed and thus lower the cost of energy due to the advanced knowledge of the storage systems. Therefore, for this next decade, human needs to concentrate on how to amass the power of artificial intelligence for using mini-grid designs and interconnections, batteries, storage systems, as seen in electric vehicles, general consumption of electricity, like load forecasting.
Ron, what concerns you most about the data collection this decade from sensors, IoT devices, and embedded personal smart technologies?
Well, in the previous decade, we already saw data collection, personal data collection on a massive scale, which has brought us so many of the benefits of, for instance, AI-powered systems, but also some of the drawbacks that we're concerned about, like threats to our privacy or autonomy, security. I think in the next decade, we'll see this, these kinds of threats, these kinds of drawbacks to an even greater extent, because the move will be from the kinds of data that have been collected in the past, which are on the data that we consciously select between, like pages that we like or products we buy, to kinds of data that are not just biometrics, but continuously valued data about our interactions with the various systems we'll be using, that reveal even more about us than we can, than we might understand on a personal level. And this opens us up even more to the same drawbacks that we've seen already, which is, again, threats to our security, but also manipulation, I think we'll be much more vulnerable to being coerced into making decisions that seem to us to be voluntary, when in fact are the result of intentional manipulation by various parties involved.
Okay. There we go. Thank you, Tanmay, who's here tonight, for that contribution. Delphine, I think, is on as well. That's brilliant, Tanmay. Thank you. Talking about Sophia the robot and robot rights, teeing up Timmy excellently. And of course, Ron as well, who did that. Timmy, it's great to see you. You're tuning in from Nigeria, is that right?
Yes, precisely.
Good. If we don't hit 4 continents, we're always disappointed. So that is brilliant. I will introduce you now. I'll start by saying that he tweets at Timmy the Law, TIMI THELAW. So go and follow him on Twitter there. One of Africa's foremost tech lawyers and policy consultants. Timmy has a core capacity in digital policy and open governance. He is Africa's representative and global vice president, on the Global Members Advisory Board at the International Republican Institute's Generation Democracy. I managed to say it. Representing policy leaders and organizations across 70 countries, working on driving open governance. He is 2020's most influential young Nigerian in policy influencing, and he sits on the board of Feed to Grow Africa. He's won several awards for his distinction in policy influencing and open governance, including an award from the Uni of Life and President Barack Obama. He has made several presentations on digital policy, open governance, authored 2 books, namely The Hustler's Mentality and Yes, Africa Can. He participated in the research sprint on digital self-determination at the Berkman Klein Center, Society for Internet and Society in Harvard University. Wow. There's some incredible, we have great bios at MKAI, but tonight, these are just interstellar. They're just amazing. Timmy, I'm going to take myself off the screen. It's 18:32. If I can ask you to go for about 22 minutes, is that okay?
Fantastic.
And
yes,
just shout if you need us. Otherwise, this space is yours, and it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too, Richard. And thank you for having me. And thank you to the MKAI team for making this happen. I also want to thank previous speakers, David, Valerie, Rose, for doing such a fantastic job. Absolutely brilliant. When you are designated somewhat as the last speaker in this sense, you have the privilege, to summarize from very brilliant people. So you've laid a good foundation and also a good building. Perhaps, I could just put a roof on top of it. Primarily speaking, thank you everyone for being here. In the short time that we have together, I will be particularly discussing the issue of responsible AI in terms of a pathway beyond just regulations, right? And so in discussing the particular topic of responsible AI, a pathway beyond regulations, I will be doing 4 things. First, I will identify what guarantees a competitive advantage as AI develops. And secondly, I would also identify the 4 key areas of concern as AI evolves. David has talked about the future of AI and the fact that by 2045, we might be looking at the full development of AGIs, that's artificial general intelligence, right? So now the third thing is I would identify how regulations assuage these concerns. And then lastly, I would submit my submission or thesis will be aimed on 2 proposal pathways to guarantee a responsible AI and how to avoid the domination as AI evolves into the future. I would also be talking on a few things that previous speakers have touched on in that context. So to start with, fantastic the fact that Valerie had you know, I've done what a professor is known to do, which is to profess. She has done a complete breakdown, some kind of simplification as to what AI is, right? What I would then do is take it on from there to say, for the sake of audiences, say that AI largely are being categorized into, say, two categories, largely, although there are three, but I'll just mention the two broad categories, which is artificial normative intelligence, which is also called weak AI, and artificial general intelligence, which is the more robust, advanced, futuristic goal towards what AI can do, right? So interestingly, I'm sure that when we talk about artificial normative intelligence, we're talking of things we know, web optimization, you know them, chat boxes, and generally frameworks or platforms that leverage on AI, you know, in that context, self-driving cars, you know, you name them, a whole lot of it. I want to just quickly do an exercise before I proceed, which is, you know, artificial normative intelligence with AI, right? I want us to get on our phones or our keyboards on the chat session and type in, don't press enter, just type in the areas where you see AI in terms of artificial normative intelligence as we have it now, operational, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in, you know, automation, whether it's in manufacturing, whatever area that you have personally experienced or seen or heard artificial normative intelligence being applied. So we're going to type that into the chat box, but please don't press enter. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, please, to do that. And then I will tell you when to put enter on so that we can get our fingers exercised. Anyways, I hope that is good, Richard. Okay, so let's see. Just keep typing in areas where you think artificial normative intelligence has been applied or have experienced it. It's, you know, and like everywhere around us, like air, but don't press enter. In the next 20 seconds, our time will be up. Okay, so there's a good time for silence. Yes. Okay, we have 5 seconds. Okay, so somewhat time up. You can put in enter. Enter, let's see flowing, you can see, right? It's coming in. Fantastic. Thank you, thank you. I just wanted to be sure that we were together on the same page. Now, we can see that artificial normative intelligence has a vast measure of use. Someone talked about OCR AI for crimes, right? So it's vast use, but like David rightly stated, there's a fact that we have a tendency in the next few years from now, say 2045, perhaps a little much earlier, because of the current drive and push and competition among nations to break through on artificial intelligence, right? So we might be seeing a move into artificial general intelligence in the future. Now, let's now come down to responsible AI. Now, in the context of responsible artificial intelligence, what in your context will that mean, right? So for me, it will mean ethical artificial intelligence. It will mean human-centered. It will also mean inclusive. It could also mean, you know, an artificial intelligence that that falls within the context of regulations and has a compliance framework built into it. right? So responsible AI. Now, let's now move further to why should AI be responsible, right? Because that is a core context of conversation. Now, I want to take it from a more capitalist point of view, because you see, the future of artificial intelligence will be driven mostly by incentives, right? There must be incentive for driving the development, whether from the private sector or whatever sector. And the private sector will play a key role in driving that, right? And one of the key things is the fact that, you see, what will define competitive advantage in the development or evolution of artificial intelligence, as David Wood has rightly stated it, will be basically the concept of trust. It will not just be about the fact that there's certain superiority, right, to the quality, because at a time, a lot of countries would actually be able to beat their chest and say, look, our AI is the best, right? So it will not be about which is the best. It will now be about which can be trusted. And so that is what is going to define the competitive advantage going forward. Now, that drive towards the development of artificial intelligence will come with its challenges going forward, whether from artificial normative intelligence to artificial general intelligence, right? Or conscious artificial intelligence, whatever it is. 4 key areas of challenges will come up, and I've zoomed them into 1, data. 2, biases or inherent biases, right? 3, ethical issues. And 4, liability. In other words, who bears responsibility for what? So those are the 4 key areas of challenges that I'd already zoomed down into as artificial intelligence evolves going forward. Now, when you look at these 4 key areas, let's now break them down a bit and see where regulation comes in. Now, when you talk about data, right, there will be a challenge as to data, quality data. And by quality data, you might also be talking about how inclusive is the data, right? How responsible is the data? How compliant is the data? In that context, you might be looking at issues of data privacy, which interestingly has been robustly dealt with globally, except for a few developing countries, where there's a challenge with robust legal framework for data privacy or data quality issues, right? And so what you have, for example, you have the European GDPR, which further conversation in the course of this program is going to talk about, right? And which has also influenced the growth of, data privacy laws globally to some extent, right? And you see some of the challenges inherent in that, for example, is that you see, when it comes to issues of regulating in that context, you see that some, in the context of the GDPR, a lot of private companies that were not compliant or did not meet up to the standards had to start to run helter-skelter, had to find a way to align with the provisions of the law, which led to a lot of rejig in the framework or in private sector as it were. And so that is some of the challenges we might see with regulations, because a lot of companies will try to play catch up because they had not been they've not had a minimal threshold framework for how the artificial intelligence is to evolve or how they're going to interact with artificial intelligence, right? So there'll be a data challenge. And how regulation is going to deal with that, is something that I'm going to delve into particularly now. Second thing is biases. How do you deal with the inherent biases? Are regulations enough to be able to anticipate biases, whether in terms of race, in terms of opinions, in terms of social gender biases? These are key issues. Now, ethical. By ethical, I do not just mean the ethics of it, but I also mean how inclusive will artificial intelligence be in terms of being acceptable to the users. Because if we do not deal with the ethical challenge, what we might then have is a distrust between the makers of artificial intelligence and the users of artificial intelligence. So ethics is quite key in terms of how do we also communicate the limitations and the uses of artificial intelligence to the end users. That is an ethical issue. And then lastly, liability. Who bears liability for whatever artificial intelligence is used and the consequent impact of such? For example, I remember that when Google released their AI, that started cursing or that started to produce curse words, and they had to retrieve it back, from the public. So who bears liability for what? Now, to a large extent, we see that, right, regulation can play a key role, for example, right, in terms of data privacy and a few others, but it is not enough. What else do we need? Now, even in terms of regulations itself can be an hindrance to progress, just as mentioned by Rose, in terms of local regulations hampering the development of, artificial intelligence in a particular location. So regulation can be a two-edged sword. It can be a blessing and a curse, right? Now, going forward in that context also, when you look at it, regulations also can be a blessing in the sense, but the challenge with regulation then will now be developing frameworks. For instance, in terms of intellectual property, IP issues, if an AI makes music, who owns the IP to that musical work, right? These are core issues that might come as antecedent issues out of, whatever AI produce in terms of who owns the copyrights to such music produced by artificial intelligence or an intellectual property work produced. So those are core issues of concern, right? And also in terms of liability, you talk about economic policy. How do you frame regulatory frameworks to protect the economy of a local environment from the influx of imported artificial intelligence that will stifle employment or, issues of such nature? So those are core issues of concern. However, artificial intelligence and regulations, it can be a two-edged sword. But you can see that the European Union has taken a step in terms of the proposal. Recently in April, the European Union came up with some proposal for, regulating artificial intelligence. And the focus of that proposal was as to the risks, reducing the risk or eliminating the risk, if possible, and increasing the opportunities with artificial intelligence. So it is a risk-based approach to regulation, and it identifies 4 key areas in terms of risk. Unacceptable risk, which needs to be prohibited. High risk, which needs to conform with certain assessments. Limited risk, which needs a certain level of transparency, and minimal risk, which requires certain codes of conduct. However, the challenge is that, for example, in the US, there is a much more hands-off approach to dealing with innovation and technology evolution, right? So there's already a challenge in terms of ideology or framework in that context. right? So these are core issues of concern. And also a lot of critics have also complained about that regulation having been overtly broad. For example, it extends to Bayesian estimation, which a lot of people say it's a mathematical theorem, right? So these are core issues with regulations. And so having established that regulation cannot do it all, what are the two pathways that I will propose or submit in conclusion? First is the fact that, look, we must understand that there needs to be certain community, recognized community for AI governance framework, right? And so you see the evolution of the internet, you see the internet governance framework globally. But we can learn from the internet governance framework in terms of artificial governance framework to make it more inclusive, such that we bring in civil society, because I see that the conversation is largely between private sector and governments. But the role of civil society is key in terms of ensuring that issues of human rights, because as AI evolves, there will be challenges around issues of human rights, issues of digital self-determination as it interacts with artificial intelligence, right? The issues of the digital self or the self as a person and its interaction with AI. And so we need to start bringing in, as much as we have technical forums involving businesses and governments, we need the civil society players to be part of frameworks going forward in terms of the evolution of artificial intelligence. That's one. Because policymakers are often disconnected from the day-to-day activities within sectors, particularly when it comes to, and we cannot trust private companies. All the private companies coming up with frameworks, and you see, the truth about it, like Shakespeare said, what you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say, right? And so we've seen antecedents where private players put policies in place, but they do not particularly follow those policies. And so we cannot particularly also trust them. So government needs to step in, civil society needs to step in, but it must be done carefully, not in terms of regulating to stifle development, but in terms of managing risk. I can see Jessel already. So second point, right, which is the last point here, is that you see, we also must understand the nature of international politics, because you cannot rule out international politics from the technological development, particularly in AI. And so we need increased AI policy entrepreneurs. And in that context, I'm glad that Rose is with the United Nations. My second and last point is that there's the need for the role of international not-state actors in setting up inclusive agenda for the development of artificial intelligence. And by so doing, I'm not just talking about the United Nations, WHO, and the likes. I'm also talking about regional bodies. For example, as an African, I'm talking about African Union needs to step up to start playing a key role in framing frameworks for the development of its local artificial intelligence as it grows and evolves. Because with that, we might be able to solve some of the challenges that Rose mentioned in terms of leapfrogging and identify legal bottlenecks to the development of artificial intelligence for the common good of all. So thank you so much. Over to you, Richard and Giselle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Timmy. I think it was completely full of insights, and it is important to know responsible AI has got many facets to it. Mainly ethical is not just one part of it, but compliance, regulations, human-centered, inclusive, diverse, etc. are a part of it. And to consider a whole holistic view of it, what makes it more trustworthy is the key, not the performance. or how fast your algorithm or how sophisticated it is. And to build that, we need to know what are the concerns and what are the key areas that could bring into picture the data, the biases, as well as the regulations. But what is important for us is, as we move ahead, it is important for larger corporations, for governments, and local bodies to understand that society and the inclusion and building of frameworks is the key. It's the regulation and the inclusion, a marriage between the both, which is going to work, because regulation can have both the sides, as you mentioned. We can't over-regulate because that can hamper innovation as well. So we need to find a midway so that we can build responsible AI and build better technologies. Thank you. Thank you so much, Timi. I leave you to the chat for any questions, and Richard, over to you for summarizing the event.
Wow, we made it on time. I'm out of breath from the speakers tonight. Timi, I echo what Jaisal said. That was impassioned, that was powerful, that had many, many things for us to think on. Thank you for delivering that talk. Really, really appreciate it. It's 4 minutes to. I want to say thanks one more time. So Jaisal, I'll start with you. Thank you for your moderating and keeping us on time. We did it. So I want to thank all of the little clips that we played from people. And some people are telling me we had some lag on those. So a little bit of a technology challenge for us to work on next time. But do not worry. Hazel, our wonderful digital marketing manager, will be posting those this week and next. So you'll be able to go and see those, and we'll tag everybody on there. And so Valerie and Rose, of course, thank you so much for preceding Timi and speaking tonight.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful tonight.
Thank you indeed. And we've got 3 minutes, so I'll ask those with their cameras on, just a 1-2 sentences. Richard, you're up on my screen there on the left. A good event for you?
Oh, outstanding. Outstanding. I mean, all of the speakers brought fantastic content, very thought-provoking and mind-expanding as always, Richard. Thanks.
Thank you very much. David, a word of thanks again for you opening tonight. Useful event for you?
Lots to think about, yeah. And the chat's been stimulating, and all speakers give me a lot to think about too. So really appreciate you organizing it. And it's the community that adds the value. It's not just the individuals here. It's the community is stronger than the individuals. So I commend you for the effort to build this community with its diversity and with its attention to knowledge as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Our leadership team covers 6 countries, 3 continents, and it's 70% female-led as well. Tam, a good event for you? You're muted, but it sounded like, oh, there you go.
Wonderful, yeah. Sounded the same.
Excellent. Excellent. Vibhab?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was brilliant. I think there was such brilliant insights out there in terms of the different diversity and everything. I really enjoyed the event, and I think it was fantastic in terms of like echoed Timi's thoughts in terms of the different aspects. And I have 2 questions which I'll follow up and ask separately for AI 2030, being a lawyer myself. 2 things that are burning questions. So it's brilliant.
And whoever's been manning the spotlight thing, thank you so much. You've got quick fingers, whoever you are. Keep putting people on the stage. It's not me. I'm really slow. Odelia, how was it for you?
My audio, okay. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for all these different perspectives and voices, and really, really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jerry?
Another wonderful MKAI family event. It's just incredible. They just get better and better.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Marcus?
Yes, fantastic as always. And I've shared with you in the chat what I can share. You know, I'm doing a couple of things with you and in other places. I'm looking forward to the time when the robot is doing all my work and I'm immersing myself all day long with these talks. So I'm hoping you expand the MKAI family and we get to a point where we can have these almost daily. So please, let's do this.
Sounds fun. Renato, I see you've got your camera on. See you, Peter. Take care. We've hit 7 o'clock. We're going to have to move on to GDPR. I see Federico's here. Anna, we have you on camera though, just before we move on to our next session. Enjoyable event for you? You're on mute, Anna. Anna, what did you say? You said no, it was no good. No, you're, you're muted.
I said it's mind-boggling for someone that is a layperson like me to get all this information. It's like overwhelmed, but that's okay. I'll try to process it the best way I can and see what happens. But you know, the future is on you guys, and you really have to work hard because there's an uphill battle in terms of abuse by those in power. And so we really need to make the world better and more equitable. And I believe that it is up to you guys, and you're brilliant, and I know you can do it.
You're brilliant too, Anna. Thank you so much. Go and check out Anna's poem. Look up MKAI on LinkedIn, scroll down and you'll see Anna's poem interpreted by, what's it called? Algorithms. Go on, remind me, somebody who knows it.
Trustworthy algorithm.
Trustworthy
algorithm. Trustworthy algorithm.
That was wonderful, seriously.
Okay, right. We're changing gear. I'm looking out for Maria as well. There you are, Marie. I can put you on the spotlight as well. Okay, we'll have one pause for breath and then we'll move straight on. So we've just done 2 hours of talking about AI in 2030, but who needs a drink? Who needs a toilet break when we can go straight on and into the next hour? So if you're going to stay on for this, I will forgive you just disappearing for 2 minutes, of course, but
for the event.
Thank you very much. So Carsten, Federico, Simon, Marie, you are very, very welcome. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in tonight.
Thanks for inviting.
Are you all in the
really
UK?
Good session. Really
Thank
good session.
Thank you so much. Everybody in the UK or are we spread out?
No.
Yeah. I'm in the UK.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Richard and Odelia. I am in Italy.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, good. Marie, were you saying yes, you're in the UK or yes, you're not in the UK?
No, I'm no longer in the UK. I moved to France and there is no way for me to go back to the UK because it's on the red list. So.
Oh, you're in our sister country. France and England famously always got on, of course, over the years. Well, so we've organized this special briefing, this rapid response, we're calling it. And thank you so much, because each of you responded super quickly to say, yes, you'd come and have this conversation. So this is an open dialogue. We're going to go for 1 hour and the next 57 minutes, because this is just too fascinating not to dive into straight away. Let me do a quick set of bios for everybody. And then, Federico, I'm going to come to you and just give us a bit more context about why we've organized this session and the triggers for this. So Simon, let me start by introducing you. You are the Information Governance Manager for Revia Health, working with healthcare organizations to accelerate the trajectory of mental health research. Previously, the DPO, Data Protection Officer for the Orders of St. John Care Trust, a not-for-profit charity with around 70 care homes. You are very welcome.
Good to be here, thank you.
Absolutely. Federico, lawyer, PhD candidate, providing data protection consultancy services for Qubit Privacy currently. He's the author of Data Protection Law in Charts, a visual guide to the general data protection regulation. Federico, thank you for coming. And Odelia, thank you for inviting Federico as well.
Thank you very much for the invitation again. Hello, everyone.
Very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Marie is here, Senior Legal Counsel, specialized in intellectual property and data protection. She handles all legal aspects of R&D projects, from technology development to licensing and litigation. She started by dealing with GDPR when working on health projects for a top UK university. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. And yes, dealing with GDPR on health at the time of Brexit in the UK was a mess.
Still is.
For sure. And then Carsten, shout out for Milton Keynes, of course.
Well, Yeah.
I had to invite you the minute we had this topic on our hands. So he's been working in the UK as the EU settled status, leading and executing end-to-end service delivery for local, pan-European and global clients. Across industries, manufacturing, financial services, telco, energy, retail, transport, health, government, you name it. He's there. He delivers hands-on data protection management, DPO as a service, actively supporting clients in, of course, GDPR compliance, and the end-to-end hands-on business analysis, compliant audits, gap analysis, risk management, management of change, and continuous process improvements. You are all very welcome, and welcome, Carsten.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for the speakers before us here. It was amazing. This whole thing was brilliant. It really was unbelievable.
Oh, thanks.
if I could just put something into the chat.
Into the chat, yeah.
There is a link. There's a link to the Churchill Society, okay? And I don't want to drag out old stuff, yeah, but Churchill actually made a wonderful speech back in the day in 1947 after the war. And basically one of the quotes from here that really resonate with me, and that is, our powers are limited, but we know and we must affirm what we mean and what we want. So if we go down that route, and really state what we want out of this, then I think the change will happen. Yeah, and for me, it is really, really important that we make the change, and change is really individual. Yeah, so when we talk about big corporations and big government and all of that, if you really boil it down to something, it is they are all made up of people. Yeah. Every organization is made up of persons, one way or the other. So therefore, the change that we need to affect, we need to look into the mirror and affect ourselves, the change on ourselves. And I think that is what Rose meant in the part as well, and then give access to that change to other people and become an agent for change going on. I think that would be really, really important. Yeah, irrespective of GDPR or AI, it is, the human touch of change is really important here.
They're just stories and ideas at the end of the day. But let's not go down a no Harari just at the moment. Carsten, thank you so much for that, and a wonderful way to open this session as well. I'm going to add Ardelia to the spotlight because she's going to moderate this session and give me a rest for a little bit as well. Federica, what's going on? What's the story here? Set the scene for us about this report and what's happening.
Well, just to start, I think that this week and the week before, we have a lot of fresh information from the UK and Europe. First of all, because the European Commission has released it hasn't released, but it was leaked and it was announced that the adequacy decision for the UK was released. I haven't seen it, but well, it was announced that it is, so we have to try. We have to trust that it is. But at the same time, it was released the UK Task for Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform report, which is the Tiger for short report, which is a report. The report was made by 3 Tory politicians who recommended. They made a lot of recommendations. It is a 130 pages report, but the part concerning GDPR or data protection, it is only 3-4 pages long. So it will be a very, very short introduction just to trigger the discussion, to kick off the discussion. So they basically propose to replace the GDPR with the new UK framework of citizen data rights. They claim that this framework will give the UK citizens more control over their data and will boost free flow of information. But well, what are the 2 main suggestions or the 2 main proposals that they make? They first of all they say that they will give more and meaningful control to data subjects over their data, and they plan to boost artificial intelligence by removing or suggesting to remove Article 22 of the GDPR. Then I will explain very briefly what it means. So what it means, giving more control to people. They first of all, they reference a report in which they say that, well, we all know that data, even though we try to avoid this word of that the data is a commodity, we all know that big companies, big data companies treat data as a commodity. Data is new oil is a phrase that we all are used to listen. But well, they reference a report in which they say that an email address of a single internet user is worth $89.
Or something like that.
89. Well, $1998. It is much more or less the same. And the total data of an average US resident is about $2,000 and $3,000. So they make an analysis. They reference a study in which they claim these are the numbers. It is very difficult to know, but well. In a nutshell, they consider that the GDPR is prescriptive, inflexible, and particularly onerous for SME, which it is
true in the healthcare.
It is true. Every law is prescriptive. I can't imagine any law not being prescriptive. After all, if it is a law, it must be prescriptive. Otherwise, it would be a guideline, a suggestion, a recommendation, or whatever, but not a law. So it is prescriptive. But it is true that for small companies, it can be burdensome. Then we can discuss this statement. They claim that this new framework will give more control over their data, and they allow the resale of their data. It is true that it may be a tempting idea to give more control to citizens over their data and even allowing the sale. But well, we have to remember that we are talking about fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are by definition not tradable. We cannot trade with fundamental rights. Even though fundamental rights can be limited in many situations, but we cannot trade fundamental rights. I cannot trade my freedom. I cannot trade certain fundamental rights that I have. So I am skeptical of this solution, but there are many suggestions on this regard. Then, concerning consent, they mentioned that consent is one of the most important legal basis to process personal data. I can say that, well, consent. It is not about cookies. Cookies are not about GDPR. They mention cookies, but they are not GDPR. We can skip this. I can avoid criticizing them for this misunderstanding. But well, cookies are about PICAR, not GDPR. And it's true. It is true that they mentioned that cookie is an automatic tick box operation, and the cookie banners often causes not only information fatigue, but also it is really annoying. It is true, but the solution. I remember a post that made by Robert Bateman, which I fully agree. He says that, well, the solution is not wipe out the GDPR. The solution is enforcing it. So, or PICAR, no GDPR, GDPR and PICAR. So then they mention data trust. I am not going to give an opinion on data trust because I am not an expert. I barely know the idea of data trust. So
there are a few in France. The Health Data Hub for health projects. So they are a repository of health data. They stock them in a specific way and they give you specific authorization. But I think the data, they have specific security and anonymization requirements with respect to the data.
Yes. Well, that's why I will leave this part of data trust to you, because I'm honestly I have to read a bit more on data trust. But well,
we do have a couple in the UK as well.
Yes, and I think that there are also in Canada or in the US, but well, I'm not sure. And finally, one of the most concerning suggestions that they make is about removing Article 22 concerning automated decision making. They claim that Article 22 limits the development of AI systems. So they propose either the removal of Article 22 or at least remove the human review of decision. We know that the automatic decision making is heavily regulated on the GDPR in Article 22, and one of the requirements for automated decision making to be allowed is to have a human in the loop on the loop, so and a natural person can review the decision, can take a decision against, or decide not to take a decision based on the system. And I think that this is a really important safeguard for data subjects. And in this report, one of the most striking suggestions is to remove it altogether. So, well, I think as we work on data protection, we must be, at least this is my impression, I am a bit not concerned, but yes, surprised for these bold claims and for these recommendations. So I am all ears. I would like to listen also your opinions on this particular subject.
That's the first part, because they have a draft data strategy for health.
So thank you so much for this wonderful.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for this wonderful summary. You touched a lot of interesting points. So I see that we look forward to discuss with you. And so speaking about, for example, control over data and consent, we see that there is an asymmetry in the information that users has. And what does it mean, for example, to have an alternative to this tick box? So what could be an alternative to this? Mary, you would like to comment on this?
No, in fact, I was just thinking that for me, I'm a patient and I have worked in health research, and consent or ticking all those boxes, sometimes it's too burdensome and it takes too much time. So, for example, when I'm thinking about health, there should be an exception or a legal basis for public health research. And you wouldn't need any consent, you would still need security, you would still need some transparency on your research, but that's it. It shouldn't be more burdensome than that.
Can I come in on that point, Marie? Because I think in the UK we've got that. We would put it under the exercise of public authority laid out in law. And what we've seen for those in the UK, we've seen the NHS Digital, which is our kind of information collection part of the NHS. Because we just love putting NHS and then something out of it. But they have failed spectacularly in using GP data for planning of research by completely failing to tell people about how to do it. And I think in terms of the tick boxes, I don't think actually necessarily it's so onerous, but I think those of us working in data protection and working in health research need to be far, far better at communicating that in ways that people can understand. But there is an absolute holy grail, I think, in terms of finding something that is giving people enough information to be sufficiently informed, whilst not kind of giving them, oh yes, and then we're going to take this data in a test tube and prepare, and just going stage by stage ad infinitum. I think there's kind of two levels of providing information. One is here's the bare basics, and if you want to know more, we can give you more. But that does take time, and that's the tricky part.
I mean, we did say earlier that we won't really want to talk about cookies, yeah, but if that is the perception of the general public of that is GDPR, cookies is not GDPR at all. Cookies is about here's my machine, whatever, my phone, yeah, and I allow you to put something onto it. That is what a cookie is, right? And my consent around this. GDPR is all about making sure that my personal data is safeguarded, number one, and number two, when I have given it away, or whether there may be other additional legal basis for a processor to process my data, not just consent. Yeah, consent is just one of 6. That then can move the data across the European landscape. That is the second objective of GDPR. And so safeguarding is one, and free movement of data is the other. Okay, and in order to achieve both, what we really have to do and look at are the combination of technical and organizational measures that help us to protect the individual, to protect the data. Yeah, and me being German, and really, I don't want to drag in the Second World War, particularly not before Tuesday anyway. My grandmother was 23, I think, when the Second World War started, 23. And she just had my father, given birth to my father, and went through that horrible, horrible time. Yeah, and that time was also inflicting constraints onto every individual, and they were taking data that they were spying on. That state was spying on the individuals, and that is one of the drivers why Europe said, we don't want this anymore. And in fact, you can read it up in the link that I sent. Even Mr. Churchill said it's a good idea to protect the individual. Okay, so what we now see is a political landscape which we can't really divorce from these discussions, where people want to take our data, my data, and want to make money out of it. Now, I don't blame them for making money out of it, but I want to be in control of my data. I want to be data sovereign. And I think Timmy said something very similar earlier today. So data sovereignty is really important subject as well to take. So when I look at all of this, ticking the boxes is not GDPR. Making sure that my data is secure is another. And when we now apply this security, what are the measures that we can take? So really, what is it that even a small and medium enterprise can do? They can encrypt the data. Yeah? And suddenly, even though it is still personal data, but it is no longer readily usable. It is not in clear format. Yeah? So we have to get to a point where data in clear is something of an anomaly, yeah, and everything should be. I'm in the camp that says, why don't you encrypt it? Yeah, that way you transport it, and when you transport the data subject rights and the data privacy rights, they follow the data as well from everywhere in the world. And so this whole thing is multifaceted. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
In a hospital, it's all about your personal data, and I don't see why I should pseudonymize or anonymize my data, because I need a doctor, whoever he is, have full access to my report. But my hospital is asking me to pseudonymize my data. I find this is nonsense. Sorry, but they need my data, and any doctor who has my name and my surname and my date of birth should access my data, because all my medical data are relevant to any doctor. And this is where I have a problem when people use GDPR to protect my data, to make sure that an external company or hacker or whatever cannot access them, steal them, and put them publicly on internet. But that stops here. It shouldn't go further.
Yes, I agree violently with you, Marie. So if I need hospital treatment, I'm quite happy to give up my data subject rights to that extent, and so even to the point where I say in the pandemic, yeah, when we need to collect big data in order to make a better vaccine or whatever, absolutely fine to give it up. Yeah, but it has to be in a controlled fashion. And I think the fear that I have is that when we hand over the data into this new big NHS storage, you know, and Simon said that just put NHS in front of it and everybody will sign up to it. Yeah. What I would like to see as an individual is, so what is going to happen to that data? Where is it going? Is it going to the States? and what are they going to do with that data outside of non-hospital treatment? Yeah.
They didn't specify that in the draft
Exactly.
data strategy. They said two things. They said that there should be specific power to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to have access to those data for public. I don't remember.
Public interest.
Support healthcare system. But does that mean, for example, that foreigners will have to pay more just because they are foreigners, you know? Because we, for example, see that foreigners have more commonly, they're more expensive or this kind of thing. This is what I was scared about. And the second thing is that they wanted to force the agencies to share the data with other agencies, but you don't really know what will happen with those data. And you don't really know for which public health and social care research they will be used.
Thank you so much, Mary. So Simon would like to comment on this.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone else picked this up in the Tigger report. I'm going to call it Tigger because then I can make all sorts of Winnie the Pooh references. But in the report, one of the things that struck me a lot is that I think the word individuals is used about maybe 2 or 3 times, data subjects a couple of times, citizens and consumers, it's just the rest of it. And that worries me for a couple of reasons. One, it starts entering into kind of more US style language where you rate people's rights based on their wealth or what they're consuming. You kind of break them down to just simple economic pawns rather than people. But actually the second point, which is one which I'm very sorry to say is becoming, I think, increasingly more prevalent in the UK political circles, which is around delineating British people and others. And that's really disturbing because particularly, you know, Britain has a mixed legacy when it comes to human rights. I mean, slave trade, concentration camps, it's not a very proud history. But actually in the last kind of 56 years or so, when we've had people like David Maxwell Fyfe, who was the deputy prosecutor at Nuremberg, sorry, we brought the Second World War back again, and then went on to be one of the midwives to the European Convention on Human Rights. And it kind of feels like we're kind of pooing on our own heritage as a country. And it's quite disturbing because once you start to dehumanize people, well, we know historically where that goes. And it means we can do things like separate children from their parents at the border and put them in cages. You know, and Lord Wilson, one of the previous justices on the Supreme Court, said in an audience in America, this practice of people separating children and their parents at the border wouldn't happen very easily in Europe because we've got the European Convention on Human Rights and the rights to a private and family life. Correct. And so I'm really disturbed by all of this in terms of that part. But I think we need to get away from the commodification of data in the way that distracts it from the individual, because you can't divorce those two things. I think if we, you know, data isn't so much the new oil because it's dependent on people. It's, you know, when we start commoditizing people, there is a name for that. I think it's closer to that than it is to commoditizing a raw material. I think the last thing I would say very quickly was, did anyone else start to kind of feel the data protection community go into collective apoplexy as they read some of the incredibly basic legal inaccuracies and errors within this report? Things like, you know, consent is the main legal basis. Is it? Is it?
It's the one most people use because, you know, when I was doing research contract for health project, I was thinking I could use contract or legitimate interest or potential, not public health, for getting the data, especially data that were collected 10 years ago and that there was no GDPR at this time. And my boss was like, no way, we have to use consent. I was like, why? I mean, why do you always need to use consent, especially for research project during COVID, on COVID, for public health benefits?
Do you think there might be some kind of I think, Federico, I think you're being far too forgiving of British politicians. And, you know, for someone who has been legislating almost as long as I've been alive, I kind of expect him to have opened the GDPR and read it. But based on this report, he clearly hasn't.
I truly agree with you, and I would also build on Karsten's comments when he mentioned that GDPR is about free flow of data and protecting fundamental rights in general, in particular data protection. We have to remember that also Article 22 is about protecting human dignity and avoid that person are reduced to things, and that have a person monitoring the functioning and the outputs of AI systems. So it it is quite concerning for British people if this report gets more attention, and of course, well, and we will know we don't know what will happen with the adequacy decision. This is totally another chapter if this report continues with the legislative procedure.
The adequacy decision is time limited anyway, so, and I assume they can review it if things change in the UK.
Yeah, of course it can be also invalidated, but well,
yeah, by the Court of Justice.
Yeah.
Let's go for another.
Strength 3.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also Article 5, Federico. So that does it states that data, the purpose of why data are collected should be clear, isn't it?
Yes, of course. One of the principles of data protection is, among others, purpose limitation. Purposes must be established prior to start collecting data, and they must be clear, well, very detailed. So in this report, there are so many confusing things in this report. So and in this aspect, they mention consent as the main basis of for processing data.
Yeah, I was wondering how this could be applied also to data that are concern your biometrics, or that some data that could be inferred from other one. So it's very complicated.
Yes, indeed. But these kind of things, there wasn't. The report don't go very deep on this issue. They only mention that they plan to change the scope or core of the GDPR, making this instead of the system like it is, they're making it more user-centric, and that the user regain control of the data and be able to resale it. But well, I am a bit skeptical of this kind of mechanisms, but I am not sure how it works in other jurisdictions, in particular the data trusts.
Who want to comment on this?
Yeah, for me, we already have a GDPR. The UK GDPR is a straight copy from the European GDPR, so it's already there. We should be, in my view, we should be using what we have, apply what we have, and absolutely make changes, yeah, but not so drastic that you throw it away and start something new, because that will actually confuse the situation, in my personal view. Now, I'm in the camp where I say, well, keep the GDPR, in particularly keep Article 22. I'm fully with you there, Federico. I don't want that to be thrown away, because that in the context of AI, that gives me as the individual a mechanism to have somebody else, a real human being, to check over an automatic decision that was taken with my data, probably combined with something else, and something else again on top, and then led to an outcome which I don't understand or particularly don't like, or perhaps through bias in the data gave an unfavorable decision on me. Yeah. So it may lead, I mean, in the worst case, I may not get a job, because my application says something that the AI might not like, or the AI data that feeds might not like. So that has really significant impacts on an individual. So in that case, I really want somebody to say, can I just ask a question, and how did you arrive at this particular decision and why? Yeah. It may not overturn the decision, but at least I have a regress of some result that I can use as an individual. And if you take that away, then you basically chain me to the AI, which I don't think is right. It's not even ethical.
I think you end up in a legal position where, you know, what's one of the main issues that Privacy Shield went down is a complete lack of redress. If decisions are made about you with no redress, you're in a kind of Kafkaesque sort of novel.
Yes, you're right, and we have to take into account that Article 22 gives people redress or gives people the right to challenge decision, even when if the decision would have been taken by a human being, you would not have the right to challenge it. So it is a. I think that it is a core right for data subjects, because it is special in this sense. If the same decision would have been taken by a human being, you will not have the right to contest the decision. And apart from that, not only Article 32 will have to be erased. You have to erase also the rights to information in Article 13 and 14, which gives you the opportunity to know which are the envisaged consequences of the processing with Article 32, and also the ability to know what are the logics behind the decision. So, and this is very important for many people, even though we may not understand the what are the inner workings of an AI system. I have to be honest, I don't know, I don't understand. If someone explained me the system, how the system works in a very technical way, I won't understand it. But at least I will have the right to know the bare minimum, or I have the right to get the bare minimum information in order to get something to contest the decision, to see, well, how can I improve in the following chance that I apply for this job, that I request this social benefit. So if Article 32 is erased, I won't have this right anymore. So I think that this is very important.
Absolutely, and we see here that we have the topic of the AI explainability that became crucial, because otherwise we cannot have the interrogability of the conclusion that we have. So I think on this topic, I would like to hear from Karsten, because you are a very great expert of GDPR, and would like to know how, for example, this could be applied with, for example, the federate learning course that we have, the most recent development on the data collection.
Okay, so my view on data collections, big data collections, is actually quite simple. There are items on a transactional basis where I want to give my data away and I get something, a service in return. Okay, not a problem with that. When it comes to go beyond that purpose, yeah, so a processing for a different purpose beyond that transaction that I just mentioned, yeah, then I think pseudonymization of data, encryption of data, making sure that we divorce the personal, the private aspect from the data, yeah, that will actually then give the artificial intelligence the data that they need. Yeah, the AI doesn't necessarily need to know everything about me. It just needs to know that something happened, whether it was me or you or somebody else, should be of secondary concern, really. Yeah. So when I think about AI mechanisms and algorithms, I really encourage every person who designs an AI in such a way that you divorce the data from the personal level. Yeah? Just have data. Yeah? Have the data that you need and only the data that you need, and then take my name away from it and just hash that thing up and nobody knows it was me or you or somebody else. Yeah? That's the way I would like to see that discussion going.
Mary, please.
This might be a bit complicated for people like me living with medical devices that are connected, where many data can influence and improve the AI algorithm function, and where my doctor needs to access those data as me, not as neighbor or as a pseudonymized person or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge. Because
I understand, but I tell you what, I mean, if we look at the pandemic now and the creation of the vaccine, I think by just putting the data into buckets rather than having individual clear records would have produced probably the same result. So it is male, okay, fine, and he's old, he hasn't got any hair, so that's fine as well. Yeah, but not my name attached to it.
No.
Yeah, that I think is the fundamental difference regarding to AI. And I'm not opposed myself to give away my data, because I can see that the society can benefit from it. But at the same time, society and the people who take the data have to be very responsible with my data as well. Yeah? So therefore, if we were to take it away and make it anonymous, then everybody is a winner. That's my.
But do you consider that just removing a name and a surname makes medical data totally anonymous? Because each person has his or her personal set, and that's the main issue.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. It's more complex because location plays date and time play a role in there. So it is not as simple as I'm telling it you now. I agree entirely with you, and particularly with health data, and a certain condition coupled with here's a German bloke. There are not that many German blokes in the UK with glasses at that, I don't know, south of Milton Keynes. Yeah. You probably get me, even in a stack of hundreds of thousands of records. Very simply.
Just changing gear a little on this, because it's not just about trying to work out who you are, is it? I mean, if we use the federated learning of cohorts flock from Google, and bearing in mind that Amazon's rejected it, Reddit's rejected it, I can't say it, and you know the problem is that it can take you to outcomes. This is one of the clips we played earlier, and it can influence and nudge you, and it doesn't matter who you are, right? It's leading you to outcomes. Putting a name to the person is irrelevant. It's still getting you to press this, buy this, vote for this, whatever. That in itself is a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah. I agree, and I shut up in a minute. But there, the individual has to take responsibility as well. Okay, I as an individual, I'm not forced to click a button or download the latest Fandango app onto my phone because everybody else has it, and I want to go to Clubhouse or whatever. Yeah? I don't care. You really have to, as an individual, you really have to think about what you want to do with your data as well. So I'm not taking that away. Yeah. So
we're going to get into a philosophical debate if I keep talking, but this kind of predictability, rationality, you know, and I think people are very much led and influenced without knowing what we're doing. But let me not take us off down that road. Simon, looks like you want to
yeah, I think I'm not entirely sure I agree with the individual responsibility bit. So I think actually and this is a kind of generally accepted legal point in the UK, if you've got a power relationship where you've got one party that has got way more power than another party, then actually the courts have got to help balance that, which is why in an employment tribunal, you know, we brought fees in and then we've done away with that because actually we thought, you know, people need to have that access to justice. I've got a 6-year-old, I've got several children, I've got a 6-year-old, he's getting to that point where, you know, there is probably information being collected about him, despite he's got no email address, anything like that. But you know, he's got kids' YouTube and things like that. So you know, he has got no way to navigate that at all. And he's got a father who's a data protection practitioner who really should know better. But you know, if we here get confused by this sort of stuff, what kind of hope does, you know, Joe Blogs on the street really have? I think that's the way we have to keep coming back to it. I also think when it comes to large cohorts of data, it does make an enormous difference for the purpose for which it's used. So when it comes to data trust, and one of the organizations that the task force engaged with was UK Biobank, who oh, is that what you
I did work with them. I had some crazy contracts.
we do some work with them as well at Acrivia, and they collect data consensually from people, and there's some other fantastic research studies, like University of Bristol do a study called ALSPAC, which is a longitudinal study as well. Amazing work, and there's some great stuff for data linkages that you can do. But the security that goes into these is fantastic and immense a lot of the time. Wasn't sure if Marie was shaking her head and nodding. But I think, you know, that is different from, say, you know, real-time bidding and more kind of cutthroat commercial interests, where actually I think it is more difficult to advocate any kind of public interest there. But I wouldn't be afraid of this government trying. And when they put public interest in there, I'm a little bit skeptical. Given people's like Ian Duncan Smith's who chairs the report, given his record on voting rights and human rights, it's not great.
But what I liked about the draft data strategy for health was that they wanted to empower public research, and for having worked there and for having seen the mess it was, I really liked it. And I really liked the fact that they said they wanted to provide more transparency and more control for patients on their data and more sharing of the data between the institutions. So in principle, I really like it. The problem is that it's written by the UK government, and I'm not really sure between what is said on paper and looks amazing versus what will be put in practice and how the data will really be used is a different question.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the point we were making earlier about transparency and telling people and making a concerted effort. And I think, one of the things that there are loads of ways that you can do data and use data lawfully and fairly and transparently. And what we see time and time again is that in the UK, we're really bad at doing that fairness and transparency part, and therefore we fail on the lawfulness part as well. I think if we talk to people and engage with them, I can say this now, I'm preaching to the converted, but if we talk about this with people, not just like a small group of representatives representing the whole public, but if we talk to this and sell it to them, probably not the best use of the word, but and get them on board, I think people support it. I think people genuinely support the research. What is slightly weird is that this report goes, oh well, we could do research, like we've done for COVID. I was like, if we didn't have the GDPR, I was like, we do have the GDPR, and you have done the research.
Yes. But I can tell you, it was one of the most painful.
I can imagine. Yeah.
To your point, Simon, I've been thinking about this. You've got kids who are on YouTube who are clicking T's and C's and all sorts of things. They don't know what they're clicking, of course. Now, what's interesting about the "Are you a robot?" button is it's not clicking it that proves you're not a robot. It's the way that you click it and the way that your mouse moves and whatever that proves that you are a human doing it, not a robot. So at the same time, you could work out whether you have a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old moving that mouse or working that tablet, who therefore shouldn't be able to click that button because, of course, they can't read it. They can't even read, let alone read it. And it does put this responsibility back on that, do it properly or don't do it, because otherwise it just looks like it's lined up for corporate interest, doesn't it?
I think here, Richard, is do it properly, number one. But if you don't do it properly, also enforce it. Yeah, and I think that part, the enforcement part, is lagging behind as well. Yeah.
Councillor, are you suggesting that the Information Commissioner is not fully enforcing the law in the way that it could?
Yes, absolutely. Straight on.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you all looking at this report with some skepticism, or am I being too harsh?
I like some of the things that was said there, but it was very they didn't go into details. There were some mistakes, and when they say it's too burdensome for charities and public institutions, I fully agree. I have seen it.
So do I. Well, yeah, I think we all agree on the good parts. Yeah, but I think what it is behind the good parts is an awful shitload of not so good parts. Yeah,
but what I was a bit disappointed is that it's like they went into a lot of topics, trashing on. Telling the EU was doing badly and showing some great UK examples, but they didn't really go into the details. So it's a bit disappointing on that.
It feels a little bit to me like they've gone, right, it's like you take your car into a mechanic's and, I want to make it faster, and they'll be great, we'll take the brakes out of it. It's like, no, I don't want you to take the brakes out. We need those safety mechanisms there. It's like going to go, right, want to redecorate the house. Okay, we'll burn it down first.
Yeah.
It's not reform, it's deregulation. Because we know the bits that don't work, right? We know the bits where it falls down. I do also think there is an element with data protection law in the UK where there was, when GDPR came in, there was a big, GDPR, this is brand new. I think there was a kind of good opportunity for people to gloss over the fact that there were things that they should have been doing for the last 20 years, but hadn't been doing. It was a great opportunity to kind of frame this as, hey, this is something brand new. And it's not, it's just we haven't been complying with law for 20 years. And, let's just not talk about that.
Yes.
Federico, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I fully agree with Simon, Carsten, and Marie. Of course, there are many things that are not working properly well with the GDPR. even though the ICO enforced and imposed some fines, it is well lagging behind some other DBAs. But many DBAs are facing the same issues. Remember the DPC, the Irish DPC. It is the home of the most of the biggest tech companies, and it imposed only a fine to Twitter of 5,100 euros, which is basically nothing. And the Luxembourgese DPA is not enforcing decision against Amazon. So I do agree with all of you that the ICO is lagging behind, but it is a problem all across all the EU. I think that, I don't know, the Spanish Data Protection Agency is one of the most active on this regard. The Italian, or the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, but in general, I think that enforcement is a subject that must be revised in the future.
So blue sky thinking here. What if all the different European data protection authorities would actually come together and say, you take that case, you take that case, I take this case, and they just spread it out? Because, I mean, reality is that each one of them is underfunded and overworked. Yeah. And that is a good reason. That explains at least why we don't see enough there. But if they weren't that parochial and just be more European and share more out, might be better. Now the UK is out of the European Union, so it doesn't apply to the ICO.
Yeah, but the problem the UK will have is that there are more and more harmonization toward GDPR in other countries like China and Japan. So if the UK plays on its own with lighter rules, it will be great for companies in the UK, but when they will want to play out of the UK, it will be a mess because they will have dual standards. Yes,
absolutely. Not a lot of people have actually talked about the representation in the various countries. Mm-hmm. And so when I, as a UK company, provide products and services to individuals in Europe, and I do not have a company in Europe, I should actually have a representative there. Mm-hmm. And the same is true on the reverse side. So a European company that doesn't have a company here in the UK, but offers services and goods to individuals in the UK, should also have a representative here in the UK. Yeah, that is quite clear, very clear, and irrespective of the adequacy agreement or not, that still stands. Yeah.
Simon would like to add something on this.
I was only going to say, I think it's probably one of the most ambitious parts that the GDPR is having those personal representatives. There was a crack. I'll try and find the recording and send it around to Richard, but there's a chap called Tim Turner who does GDPR trading, who is a very, very frank approach to doing data protection. But he did a wonderful trading session on personal representatives. But I think it's probably one of the harder bits to enforce, and can probably fairly low on the ICO's agenda. I think I really like your idea, Carsten, actually doing that, kind of distributing the workload across the DPOs. But I guess we'd also need to get to a point where they agree on quite a lot of fundamental issues. And when you've got in the midst, in the aftermath of Schrems 2, some authorities pretty much immediately, a couple of the German ones, in fact, I was going to say, went, right, we'll cut this off straight away. But of course, because I think Germany has about 18, is that about right?
Yes, yeah, correct, yeah. Bayern has two, yeah, it's quite interesting as well. One for public authorities and one for businesses, yeah.
Yeah, which is not dissimilar to the way that Canada does data protection either, in terms of having different things that apply to public and private. Yeah, no, I really like that idea.
Yeah, indeed.
So I saw that there are some questions in the chat, and first one is, so we all agree that it's important to have a culture of data minimization, or is not? What are your thoughts on that?
Depends what you mean by minimization, because as I said, I'm a patient, all my medical data and even external non-medical data affect my health. So if minimization is just when I see my doctor, he just looks at my glucose level and the insulin injection I do, it's not worth it, because there are so many other factors that affect my type 1 diabetes that are like the activity, what I eat, stress, hormones, these kind of things that you find are external to the disease, but that influence it.
It's minimum as necessary to the purpose for which is being, we can't divorce the purpose from the data. And that will affect our attitudes in terms of the impact on individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. If I may, I think there is this, the hoarder next door, the person that doesn't throw anything away. That actually happens with data as well. And when you then have personal data in that mix, it can get actually quite dicey, even for the data controller. And I'm going to exempt the medical for the moment, okay? But if it was just a normal business, why do you want to keep that data? All you can do is lose it, and if you lose it, you have a bigger problem. So get rid, minimize the data, get rid of the storage. It's cheaper as well. Everybody wins. So
I'm not sure they're really trashing the data when they don't need them anymore. I mean, I think they keep them.
But for what reason? Because sometime in the future I might need it, and that in itself is not a purpose. That is not a purpose. And that brings it really, in my view, that brings it back to the AI. If you want to train data, you absolutely can. But again, in my view, do it anonymously. Get as much personal data out of there as you can. And you only use the personal data that you need, and only that you need.
But we when we develop algorithms, once we don't need the data anymore, and the algorithm is, we are happy with it, we don't need the data anymore, so we don't keep them. Because we need to develop an algorithm for a specific AI action, so we need to train the algorithm on data, and then we don't need the data anymore. So because the algorithm, we have the code, we know how to write it and how it should work and how it should react based on similar data, so we can get rid of the data. We need just the how do you call that? The code, like the algorithm itself, not the data that trains the algorithm.
True, okay. But at the same time, then perhaps just do a staged approach and say, okay, I need a limited amount of data in order to write my algorithm, and then train it with data that is then anonymous. Absolutely fine. But then also throw it away and put a certification behind it and said, I have thrown it away, and here's a third party that can vouch for my having thrown it away, please.
But the opposite is happening though, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we do this. I mean, you can't change your engine oil these days anymore at home, can you? Where do you put the oil? Pour it down the drain or what? So really the same concepts apply for data lifecycle as well.
So my comment there about obviously data collection going up, I put a post in the comments about Facebook on a court to try and keep data, even shadow data, as in, you're around other people's pictures, and even profiles of people who have passed away. So we know they're serious about data. My question, if you don't mind me asking one, is when I first read this, I thought, oh, is this really positive that the government's realized that GDPR was more prevalent when we were just thinking about data and metadata, and that was about it? But now, staying on the theme of Facebook, and those who hear me talk know I'm always on about Oculus Quest 2. It's an incredible piece of kit, but this phone and the IoT devices and the sensors, they're collecting a lot more inference data now, behavioral data. We're kind of living in the dataverse, aren't we, where they're monitoring our gaze and what we're looking at, and if we're flushing, and blood vessels and changes in our eyes and our retinas, and you name it. And there's cameras here looking at you, cameras going out on these headsets. They're tracking flexibility, agility, stamina over time as you use these devices. So is there an opportunity here for us to understand that we need GDPR to be, or whatever we call this, to understand that this is quite difficult data to explain or provide to a customer? Is there an opportunity here, if we just think about the positives, to protect us from this new world of data that's being collected by devices?
It's supposed to, but it's not really put in place. I mean, in practice, Google can still do whatever they want with our data. I mean,
it kind of comes back to that enforceability, doesn't it? And there's an element where our economies are so much based, particularly in the West, are so much based on those sorts of transmissions. You know, actually, is it fair in a democratic society that an independent regulator can just cut off that economic flow, which is what the DPC potentially could? And that opens up some interesting debates in between having a fair and democratic society and an independent regulator with that sort of economic power. Just so, you know, throws a bit more kind of morality into the mix. But no, I think the lack of enforcement is a big factor, because people don't see it making a difference.
no, and you can find Google as much as you want. It won't really make any difference unless they are fined in the 27 EU countries for the same millions or billions amounts. Until that, it won't change anything. They will just pay the fine and that's it.
Alibaba just paid $3 billion. Whatever, right?
Depends on how big your pockets are. And for me, it comes down to trust, right? Do I trust the controller of the data? Yes or no? Yeah. It's almost a binary question. The answer is binary. Yeah? I either trust or I do not trust. And me being German, I'm usually on the do not trust. Yeah? In fact, we do have, zero trust. Zero trust is a security concept, right?
That's right.
Apply that to everybody, to anybody who wants your personal data. Zero trust. Simple.
So I guess the question that I've been thinking about a lot recently is, how do we, as people who are on the inside, the other side, the people who can communicate, how do we engender trust? How do we communicate effectively and efficiently? And is that the $1 million question?
But I think there is a lot that is based on people understanding what you do. And when I, as a user, receive a 10-page privacy notice that anyway, I have to agree, otherwise I won't be able to use my medical app, and I need my medical app, and Google is given access to the data of my medical app because it's on Android. I mean, I can read it. I have the background, the experience, and the training to read that and to go through that. But basically, I have no choice. And a normal person that has no legal background will not understand a slice of it, any line of it. So it has to be explained in simplified terms. It has to be, people have to understand how it works without getting into thousands of paper and of forms to sign or to consent to, because they have no other choice anyway, especially when they have no choice.
Yeah, and even if you have other choices, you're talking about only one app. In my phone, I have, I don't know, 20, 30 apps. So I can read every privacy notice, and I can imagine people having reading every piece of paper. It is impossible. So and yes, it is true. Privacy policy should be shorter, more understandable for everyone. And well, it is also about people working in the industry to advise better to companies to minimize the data collection, try to destroy data that they don't need anymore. So basically complying with Article 5. So nothing more than complying with Article 5, and the management and the handling of data, personal data, would be better for everyone.
Thank you. I saw that we are going out of time, so I give back the word to Richard, and thank you so much to all the speakers. It was a very, very stimulating conversation.
Adelia, thank you so much for moderating. Yeah, that's an hour, just gone like that. So, that was really fun, really lively. Thank you so much for the debate, the insights. Federico, thank you so much again for setting the scene there at the beginning. That sort of extended intro that you gave was very, very helpful. We're obviously embarking onto what could be days of discussion here, and it's fascinating, and we haven't even got to the kind of conspiracy theories yet. Sorry, but I mean, just look at Facebook and Google's ad revenues in Europe when GDPR came in. You know, emails did that, and ad revenue did that. Wonder what their interest or involvement was in this then to get that sort of increase. So I didn't take us down that road, which is probably a good thing, but very, very helpful. Quick 1-2 line summary from each person, a takeaway for us all to think about from this session. Simon, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just very simply that fundamental rights are there because of the dignity of our shared humanity, despite any flaws and failures that we have, and not because of any citizenship, nationality, creed, or colour. They're there because we're human.
Very good, Marie.
For me, I mean, it's what I came with. Is I have no problem giving my data for public research and for health purposes, but I need to be sure that they won't be used against me. That there is a minimum need of transparency on what is done with those data.
Okay, Federico.
I am still stick to the principles of data protection. Complying with the principles, it is only one article, very short, and I think it would be better for everyone.
Yes, Carsten.
Don't do what you don't have to be done to yourself. That's what I say. Okay, simple.
Brilliant. Should we do this again in about 8 weeks or something and get the latest updates?
Absolutely.
There's a theme here, I think, or a little program. So thank you so much. I mean, just spending some time with us tonight, hugely, hugely grateful. Thank you, all of you. It means the world. We'll just close in 30 seconds, but I just see a few cameras on. Alexandra, useful, helpful?
Yeah, for sure. Eye-opening. Yes, so much to process, but yeah, wonderful. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Karen, how was that for you?
Oh, it's fantastic. Absolutely superb. Mind-blowing. And really, really interesting. Great to hear Simon, especially latterly. Really interesting comments there. Thank you.
I want a pint with Simon and just
so
get him back on some of these subjects.
Yeah.
I haven't got my cocktail book behind me, but I do make a lot of cocktails.
Well, I've got Karen Silverman at the very least, if not everybody else who's in San Francisco. When I'm next over there with my 2 jabs, we're going to have a drink over there. So what we'll do, Richard, Simon, me, and anybody else will come to Milton Keynes. Okay, cool.
You're always welcome. We have got a 20-story building with a sky bar coming, Karen. Imagine that.
Exactly.
You haven't got any of those in London, have you?
No.
All right, maybe a few.
No, a few. And I'm going to have VibHab. I'm going to India VibHab next after that.
Yeah. I'm waiting.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, right. Anna, useful for you?
Yeah. It's just like I said, you know, I'm for the underdog and defending human beings, and we're all human. We cannot put people in categories, human and other. It's not right. So we have to keep on fighting for human rights. Human rights are the most important thing.
Most definitely.
Very good,
Anna. VibHab, we started at 3 p.m. 5 hours ago for some bizarre reason. We had like a long day. And we've talked about AI leading up to 2030. We've been bang on to the UK and GDPR here. You started today, so you better take us home and then we'll get up back with our dinners or work or sleep or whatever. So over to you, VibHab, to close.
Thank you, everyone, for that fantastic discussion on GDPR. I think we started the day with AI for 2030, covered various topics from ethical AI to responsible AI would look like 10 years down the line, with fantastic talks from then fantastic from David, Valerie, Rose, and Timmy, and then sort of the crux of AI is data, and sort of closing the AI for 2030 talk was this fantastic panel discussion. Very insightful, and I think coming from India, from India where the personal data protection laws still come into effect, which is I'm hoping is going to be this session. It was supposed to be March 2020. I think this discussion was fantastic in the sense that something I was discussing with Richard as well is that when you have the law, when you're at zero, or rather when you were at zero, when you create something and then you say it's actually 30 out of 100 or 40 out of 100 is an easier situation where you actually haven't enacted the law. So it's an interesting perspective I got from that perspective, and it's very interesting to hear all the insights. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to the entire MKAI team, and thanks to all the people who stayed with us for 3 hours. Right now, we went for a long session today, 5 hours MKAI. This is like the most we've done in the last since we've been in MKAI, I think so. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Karsten. Thank you, Federico, Mary, Odelia, Anna, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Well done,
Thank
guys.
you.
See you
Thanks
all
to
online. Take care, everybody.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.